Chapter 1. Rain threaded down the glass like silver stitches, mending the night into something tight and breathless. Sloane Avery stepped through the revolving doors of the Marrow Hotel and instantly regretted wearing suede. The lobby glowed gold and champagne. Polished marble, a chandelier like a starburst caught mid-bloom. Men in suits who wore their confidence like tailored armor. She did not belong here. She knew it as surely as she knew the rent was due and her car's check engine light wasn't lying. Her cousin Val had begged her to come. "I swear the headhunter's legit. Just smile. Hand over your resume. Pretend you're not terrified." Val always said it like fear could be bullied into submission. Sloane had practiced in the mirror. One calm smile. One clean line about graduating top of her class. One careful joke to hide the way her stomach did flips at the thought of networking with people who counted zeros by the million. A waiter slipped past with a tray of crystal flutes. Perfume hovered. Gardenia? Amber. Something expensive and hard-edged. Then Sloane caught a scent that erased everything else. Cedar and smoke. A hint of winter air caught in pine. Clean, dangerous. Her heart seized. The scent didn't just wrap around her. It pushed into her. Clicked something inside her chest she hadn't known was a lock. The lobby blurred. Sounds thinned to a wire. Her skin prickled as if someone had whispered her name across it. The crowd shifted, parted, and there he was. Tall and built like he'd been sketched first as a weapon and second as a man. He wore a charcoal suit that moved with him like a promise. His hair was dark, close cropped. His jaw sharp. His mouth set like he didn't lose arguments. But his eyes, God. His eyes were a molten, unsettling amber that looked both ancient and awake. When they lifted and found her, it was like a wire snapping taut between them. Sloane swallowed. She'd heard stories late at night when Val poured wine and the news played low. Packs, treaties, wolves who ran the ridge after midnight. An alpha whose company bought competitors like appetizers. Stories, urban myths with better PR. And yet every nerve in her body lit up, and some half-buried instinct muttered the word mate like it had been waiting years for permission to speak. No, she didn't ask for this. Didn't plan her life around a fairy tale, and certainly not around a man like him. He moved. People made room without looking. Even the chandelier seemed to hush. Sloane pivoted toward the ballroom doors, pretending sudden fascination with a floral arrangement the size of an ego. "Don't run." The voice didn't need to be loud. It traveled on a frequency built to be obeyed. It drew down her spine, pulled heat out of her bones. She turned because of course she turned, and now he was there, nearer than was fair, warmer than he had any right to be in a room that looked cold. His gaze flicked over her face as if memorizing it. Sloane Avery. Her mouth went dry. "I didn't tell you my name." "Your cousin did," he said. The corner of his mouth ticked, almost a smile. "Valentina talks when she's nervous. She's been scanning the room for you for 5 minutes. You were watching her?" "I was watching you." Pause, deliberate. Cashin Hale. The name hit like a headline. Hale Holdings. Urban development. Logistics. Media. The Hale name threaded through the city like steel bones. Cashin was the Marrow. The alpha of Red Ridge, if the whispers were true. If whispers could be true. If the thing unfurling low in her stomach wasn't a trick of adrenaline and an empty dinner plate. "Congratulations on owning everything," she said. Because the only way she knew to survive a tidal wave was to pretend to learn how to surf. "I'm just here to give a resume to a woman who promised me an interview." His eyes darkened, interested. Up close, the scent of him was worse, better, devastating. "And what happens after the interview?" "I pay rent." She lifted her chin. "I don't faint when strangers say my name." "Not a stranger," he said softly, like he hated the truth of it and loved it more. "Not anymore." The air tightened. Her pulse tripped. She took a step back. "I don't know what you think this is, but it's the bond," he said, matter of fact, like discussing the weather. "You smell like rain and electricity. I haven't taken a full breath since you walked in. Heat dotted her cheeks. Anger came to rescue her from the terror. You don't get to label me, and I don't belong to you. Something old flashed in his eyes. Pain quickly shuddered. I didn't say belong. You implied it. He inclined his head, and it would have been courtly if it hadn't also been predatory. You're quick. I'm leaving. She pivoted. He let her go. It surprised her enough that she looked back, and his mouth did that almost smile again, except this time grief haunted the edges. She didn't want to wonder why grief lived there. She didn't want to think about what it meant that he smelled like a forest after lightning. Sloane slipped into the ballroom. Music swelled. People laughed too loudly. She found Val near the stage, talking too fast to a tidy woman with severe glasses. There you are. Val breathed. Relief and triumph mixed like sugar and salt. Ms. Donnelly. This is Sloane. Degree in urban planning. Top of her class. Brilliant with site assessments. Sloane, Ms. Donnelly said, extending a cool hand. The firm needs analysts who move faster than bureaucracy. Can you do that? Yes, Sloane said, and her voice was her own again. Give me a block of the city and I'll tell you why the sidewalks crack. Ms. Donnelly's mouth softened. The closest thing to affection Sloane imagined the woman could spare. Email me your portfolio tonight. Interview in 72 hours. The woman's gaze flicked over Sloane's shoulder, then sharpened. Excuse me. Sloane didn't need to turn to know why Ms. Donnelly's eyes had cooled. The air shifted, warmed, recognized. Cash and Hale hadn't stepped into the ballroom so much as the ballroom had rearranged itself to accommodate him. He didn't speak to her, not here, not now. Not when politics and cameras and contracts made every glance an incident. He only met her eyes, letting time stretch, letting the truth stand there naked and unashamed between them. The bond had chosen, and it didn't ask for permission. Sloane's phone buzzed in her clutch. A text from Val. Breathe. I've got you. Also, don't freak out, but Hale is the major donor tonight. If he stares like that any harder, the ice sculptures will melt. Sloane huffed a breath that wasn't laughter. She touched Val's arm, mouthed later, and slipped out the side doors into a hallway lined with black and white photographs of a city built under a stubborn sky. She walked until the music thinned, until the blood in her ears lost its drumbeat, until she reached a service exit and pushed into rain. Cold kissed her skin, honest and simple. She stood on a small concrete pad above an alley that smelled like wet cardboard and fried onions from the diner across the street. The city moved on around her, a vast, indifferent animal. He'll follow you, a voice said, calm and faintly amused. Sloane jerked. The man leaning against the stair rail had the kind of face that slid in and out of memory, ordinary on purpose. His suit was expensive enough to pass everywhere without comment. He held an umbrella but didn't use it, letting rain purl on his sleeves as if water considered him harmless. Do I know you? Sloane asked. You will, he said. Name's Jax. I head security for Hale Holdings. Of course you do. She crossed her arms to hide the shake in her hands. Did he send you to fetch me like what? A runaway? Jax's mouth tugged. He sent me to make sure you weren't ambushed by the press. Someone in that ballroom sells photos for rent money. You were glowing. I'm not glowing. I'm hyperventilating. She glanced toward the door, expecting Cashin to fill it like a storm. He didn't. The disappointment that edged under her ribs made her want to punch something. How long has he known about me? Jax's brow lifted. About you? Since 12 minutes before you stepped into the lobby. Specific. Precise, Jax said. He knows more now than you want him to, but not because he snooped. He added, seeing the flare of anger in her eyes. Because the bond tells more than people do. You should go home. Eat something. Sleep if you can. His gaze sharpened. And lock your windows. Is that a threat or a weird dad tip? A tip, Jax said evenly. There are other packs. Some don't like the way a hail bond shifts the field. You don't have a mark. You look human. She bristled. I am human. Jax hesitated, compassion crossing his face like a shadow. Maybe you were. Something scraped awake inside her, offended and terrified and a little hungry. Tell Cashin he can email me like a civilized man. He won't, Jax said. He'll call. He pushed off the rail and handed her the umbrella. Use this. Someone inside is already texting a gossip site. Why are you helping me? Sloane asked. Because you looked at him and he forgot the room existed, Jax said simply. And because you walked away. Sloane didn't have an answer for that. She nodded, stepped into the rain, and let the city swallow her. Her apartment was 3 flights up in a building that pretended it had never been pretty. She kicked off wet heels, dropped the umbrella in the tub, and turned the deadbolt with relief that almost hurt. The small space smelled like lemon cleaner and books. Plants lined the windows, a stubborn jungle fighting the gray. She peeled out of wet clothes and tugged on an oversized sweatshirt with a tear at the cuff. Her phone vibrated on the counter. Unknown number. She stared at it until the call timed out, then swore at herself and picked up when it buzzed again. If you're the headhunter, I can talk tomorrow, she said. If you're a telemarketer, I will cry and it will be on you. A beat. Then, Sloane. One word. Just one. Somehow it was worse than a speech. She gripped the edge of the counter. Congratulations on finding my number, Mr. Hale. Cashin, he said, and the way he said his own name made it feel like a secret she was supposed to cradle. Did my security chief frighten you? He gave me an umbrella, she said tightly, which is either very sweet or mafia foreplay. A low laugh, surprising and rough around the edges, like he didn't practice it often. I'm calling to be polite. Polite would be not calling. Impolite would be showing up, he said. I'm restraining myself. You sound very restrained. I'm trying, he admitted, something raw in his voice that made her throat tighten. I won't touch you without your permission. Her heart twisted, disloyal. Is that a rule for you or a new experiment? A vow, he said, quiet and hard. I take those seriously. She leaned against the counter and let the wall hold her up. What do you want, Cashin? To see you again. No hesitation. To talk where the room isn't listening. To learn your voice when you're not bracing for impact. Sloane closed her eyes. It would be easy to say yes. A coffee. Conversation. A chance to stare at those impossible eyes and tell herself she'd keep her soul intact. There's a job interview I care about more than your curiosity, she said. And I have a life. I'm not a project. I don't do projects, he said. I close deals. I keep promises. I protect what's mine. She flinched. There it is. He breathed out, a scrape of sound. That came out wrong. Did it? Yes. A pause that felt like he was picking up a sentence by its sharp edges. You are not a thing. You are a storm I recognized. I'm not asking you to change your life. I'm asking for a chance to be inside it. You don't get to ask the universe for chances, she said, angrier with herself than with him. It already wrote this without me. I know, he said softly. That's why I'm asking you. Silence. The radiator hissed. A neighbor's dog barked twice, stopped. What are you, Cashin? She asked finally, because she had to hear it or it would haunt her. What are you asking me to say? He said. The truth. A longer silence, as if truth needed time to gather itself. I am Alpha, he said at last. I lead. I change things. I break if I have to and mend when I can. There's a word for what lives under my skin. You already know it. The floor wasn't as steady as it had been a minute ago. Werewolves are stories, she whispered. Most stories start as warnings, he said. The good ones end as maps. She should hang up. She didn't. And me. A scent that woke a city, he said. A match to my tinder. A woman who made my wolf go quiet and listen. Her laugh was half sob. You make pretty sentences. I make weapons, he corrected softly. I want to make a life. Stop, she said. And it wasn't a command so much as a plea. Stop being whatever this is. I need time to think. You can have it, he said. But time won't change what's true. And what is that? That you weren't born ordinary, Cashin said. You were born to burn. She hung up because if she didn't, she'd tell him things worth gold. Then she pressed her palms to her eyes and dragged air into her lungs until they stopped shaking. Her apartment was too small for this much feeling. She paced the narrow stretch between kitchen and couch. Lightning flashed somewhere far off, a bruise on the horizon. She told herself she was human, and some stubborn part of her muttered back. Were you, though? When you were 12 and heard a fox 3 blocks away. When you ran track like gravity had decided to be kind to you. When you dreamed of snow and woke with pine in your mouth. Shut up! She told the part of herself that remembered everything she tried to forget. She pulled up the scanner app on her phone, half to distract herself, half to eavesdrop on a city that had stopped feeling like hers. Static, a dispatch about a fender bender, a noise complaint. Then, reports of a large animal near the river path, late hour, officers advised. Her skin prickled. She had the stupid impulse to go to the window and look for eyes in the dark. She didn't. She made chamomile tea like a person who believed in small rituals, and she took a mug to the couch and sat with her legs tucked under and texted Val. Interview in 3 days. I didn't die. Also, you owe me for tonight. Val responded with a string of exclamation marks. Then, also, you owe me for casually introducing you to the most terrifyingly attractive man alive. Sloane typed, stopped, erased. She sent, I'm going to sleep. She didn't. Not really. She drifted in that restless place between waking and running, where every creak was a step and every shadow a hand. She must have dozed, because the next thing she knew, her phone vibrated again. A single text. Unknown number. Window. Absolutely not, she whispered to her empty living room. She walked to the window anyway because this was who she was. Curious beyond sense. Brave when no one asked her to be. She tugged the curtain back an inch. The street was quiet. Rain softened to a mist. A car idled at the corner, forgettable and expensive. At the curb beneath her window, a black shape sat with ridiculous dignity. A dog if dogs were carved out of night. Its head was lifted, ears pricked, water beating and sliding off a coat that shouldn't have been that dark, that sleek, unless it belonged to something that chose its skin. Her heart slammed once, heavy and bright. She lifted the sash a few inches. Go home, she whispered, not sure which of them she meant. The animal, no, the wolf, turned its head. Amber eyes caught the streetlight and flared like coins at the bottom of a clear river. No threat. No move closer. Just a presence as patient as mountains. The text chimed again. You said time. I'm keeping watch so you can sleep. She wanted to be furious. What she felt was safer than she had a right to feel. This is insane, she told the plants. This is stalking. It didn't feel like stalking. It felt like a vow set down where she could see it. She shut the window because rain is rude to hardwood floors, and she went to the bedroom and lay down fully dressed. She listened for footsteps, for a key that didn't exist, for the click that meant she should run. She heard none of it. She slept. Morning smelled like coffee and the faintest echo of pine. Sloane showered, braided her hair, pulled on jeans and a sweater and the boots she wore when the city tried to shove. The mirror showed a woman who looked like she had been told a secret and hadn't decided whether to honor it or fight it until it bled. Her phone chimed while she buttered toast. Val, of course. How are you? Also, don't freak out, but my neighbor's cousin swears she saw a wolf near the river last night. Which is impossible, right? Right? Sloane stared at the screen, then sent. Right. Wolves don't wait at curbs. She tucked her resume into a portfolio and slid her laptop into her bag. When she opened the door, an envelope rested on the mat like something delivered by a bird with good taste. Cream paper. Heavy. No address. Her name in ink neat enough to make teachers cry. Inside, a single card, embossed with a crest she recognized from 100 skyline photos, the Hale House mark. Below it, a list in a hand she was alarmingly certain was Cashin's. Your building's front lock sticks when it's humid. The third stair from the bottom squeaks. Your east window latch needs a new screw. Don't trust the landlady's nephew. He copied a set of keys last spring. I replaced your deadbolt. Receipt on the back. Spare key is in the sealed envelope taped under your sink. Change the place if you like. She flipped the card. There was the receipt. Locksmith, timestamped 2:14 a.m. Her mouth opened in protest because boundaries, because autonomy, because who did he think he was? Someone who fixed the thing before warning you about it, her mind offered. She should be angry. She was also grateful, which made her angrier. She tore a post-it from the stack near the door, wrote in large letters, "Thank you. Do not do that again without asking." Slid it into the hall and shut the door like she could trap the message in neutral air. Work, she told herself. You're good at it. You earned that interview. You can keep two thoughts in your head. The life you built and the storm that found you. She took the stairs, counting them under her breath. On the second-floor landing, a boy in a Spider-Man hoodie sat cross-legged with a bowl of cereal balanced precariously on his knee, watching cartoons on a tablet. "Morning, Miss Sloane," he chirped without looking up. "Morning, Toby," she said, because this building was small enough that everyone ended up an auntie or an alibi. "No school. Teacher day," he said, making it sound like a government holiday. "Mama said don't go outside because of the big dog." Her chest tightened. "You listen to your mama. And maybe keep the door locked. Okay?" He nodded with the solemnity of 8. "My mama says bad things don't climb stairs." "They don't," Sloane said, and she hoped it was true. Outside, the city had shaken rain off and put on a clean shirt sky. She walked with her head high and her bag bumping her hip and the stubborn knowledge that something had shifted and the ground hadn't bothered to warn her. She turned toward the subway. A black SUV slid alongside the curb and matched her pace with a grace that He told me to tell you that saying yes doesn't cost you anything. Everything costs something, she said. Jax considered that, then nodded. Fair. He didn't drive away. There are politics. You stepped into them by existing. My job is to make sure the politics don't step back. Is that supposed to scare me into accepting a lift? It's supposed to make you consider that your life got bigger overnight, Jack said. Big things have enemies. The sun caught on a store window and flung a bar of light across the street. Sloane looked at it like it could burn decision into her. Then she exhaled. Fine, she said. I'll take the ride. But only because I like my coffee intact. Jack smiled once, like a ripple, and the SUV eased to a stop. Inside, it smelled faintly of leather and cedar. Not his cedar. His was colder, sharper, threaded with wild. She felt its absence like a missing tooth she couldn't stop touching. Is he going to appear out of thin air? She asked, buckling her seatbelt. He's already downtown, Jack said. He has a meeting with the mayor. He asked me to tell you good luck today, and that he will not contact you again until you reach out. Her heart did an odd twist. He said that. He meant it. Alpha vows, she muttered. And she didn't know when she had decided to believe in those. Jax's eyes warmed. They're not fairy tales. She looked out the window at the city, at people late and people lost and people in love with their phones. No, she said, and her voice was steady. Not anymore. Downtown rose like a challenge. The SUV pulled to the curb across from the glass tower where interviews carved and saved futures. Sloane stepped out, smoothed her sweater, checked her reflection in the window. She looked like a woman on the edge of something. She looked like someone who would jump. She didn't see Cashin. She didn't need to. She felt the idea of him like heat on the horizon. A promise kept at a distance because she'd asked. Inside the lobby, Security waved her through with a visitor badge and indifferent courtesy. She took the elevator to the 20th floor, her stomach a tight coil that released one notch per floor. The interview went like oxygen after a long dive. Ms. Donnelly had questions sharp as glass, and Sloane's answers were a rhythm she trusted. Data, cause, consequence, solutions with teeth. She talked about sidewalks and storm drains and why neighborhoods failed when the math said they shouldn't. She didn't think about amber eyes or wolves in streetlight. She thought about cities that deserved kinder spines. When it was over, Ms. Donnelly closed her folder and said, "We'll be in touch soon," which in corporate meant anything from tomorrow to never. But the woman's mouth did that almost smile again, and Sloane allowed herself the sin of hope. In the elevator down, she closed her eyes and let the hum and slide lull the buzz in her nerves. The doors opened on the ground floor, and the lobby's noise rolled in. A boy ran past clutching a paper airplane. A man cursed softly at a coffee spill. A woman laughed like summer. Her phone vibrated. A text, unsentimental and succinct. "You were brilliant." She didn't need to ask who it was. She shouldn't have felt the wash of relief and pride that went through her like warm rain. She typed, "You said you wouldn't contact me." The reply landed almost at once. "Jax gave me a one-message exception for emergencies." This felt like one. She stared at the words until they blurred. Then she wrote, "Thank you. I meant what I wrote on the card. Ask next time." "Understood" came back. Then, after a breath, "Can I ask now?" She stood in the lobby with her bag on her shoulder. A thin armor, a heavier truth. Finally she typed, "Ask. Dinner. Public place. Your choice. No press. No pack. Just you and me. And if you say no, I won't ask again." Her thumbs hovered. The city breathed. She thought of wolves who waited in the rain and men who could buy the street and still stood on the curb like a vow. She thought of Toby on the stairs and Ms. Donnelly's almost smile and the way Pine had filled her dreams like a hymn. "Okay," she wrote, and her hands didn't shake. "1 hour. I picked the place. You come alone." "On my honor," he replied. An old story might have written thunder there. A sign scratched across sky. The modern world offered something smaller and more honest. A sunbeam slipped down the atrium glass and laid itself across her shoes like a benediction. Sloane stepped into it. Then she stepped out into a city that had become a map, and she started choosing where the lines would go. Chapter 2. The diner was the kind of place you chose when you wanted to be invisible. Neon buzzed above the windows, spelling out Frankie's all night in red letters that had seen better decades. The booths were patched vinyl. The coffee came in chipped mugs, and the menu hadn't changed since someone's grandfather first fried an egg on this griddle. That was why Sloane picked it. Neutral ground. Ordinary. Somewhere that smelled of bacon grease and maple syrup, not power and pine. She sat in a booth tucked near the back, her bag pressed to her side, fingers curled around the sweating glass of water the waitress had dropped off without comment. Every time the door chimed, her body tensed. She told herself she was being ridiculous, that she'd probably beat him here, that men like Cash and Hale didn't really walk into diners when they could own the restaurants they ate in. Then the door opened, and the room shifted. Cashin walked in wearing a simple black shirt and jeans, but nothing about him looked simple. His shoulders filled the doorway. His stride absorbed the space between him and her like the world owed him shortcuts. People looked up. Construction workers with late dinners, an exhausted nurse with scrubs wrinkled at the elbows, a couple of teenagers splitting fries. Their gazes lingered, confused, as if they sensed the storm wrapped around him without knowing its name. Sloane's breath caught when his eyes found hers. The bond snapped taut again, coiling heat low in her belly, tugging at her chest like a hand that wanted to close around her heart. He didn't smile, didn't need to. He walked straight to her booth, stopped, and waited until she nodded before sliding into the seat across from her. "You came," she said, hating the way her voice softened on the last word. "You asked," he replied, as if that was the only law he followed. The waitress appeared, chewing gum, pen poised. Coffee? Cashin's gaze never left Sloane. Black. Anything to eat? The woman asked. Whatever's good, he said, handing the menu back without reading it. The waitress shrugged. Burger and fries it is. She turned to Sloane. You? Pancakes, Sloane said, because it felt defiant to order breakfast at night. When they were alone again, Cashin leaned forward, forearms braced on the table. His voice low enough that it was just for her. Thank you for this. This isn't gratitude, she said. It's curiosity. I want answers. You'll have them. Sloane studied him, trying not to drown in the gold of his eyes. Start with the truth. Why me? His jaw tightened. There isn't a why. The bond doesn't explain itself. It just is. When two souls fit, when the wolf inside recognizes its match, the choice is made. You are my mate. Her stomach twisted. That's not an answer, Cashin. That's mythology. It's biology, he corrected gently. It's history. It's power older than laws. And it doesn't care if you believe in it. Sloane forced a laugh. So I'm supposed to accept that some primal magic decided my future without asking? No, his voice hardened, though his eyes softened. You don't have to accept anything. But the bond exists whether you choose it or not. The only question is how we live with it. The waitress returned with their plates. The smell of fries and maple syrup broke the tension for a heartbeat. Sloane drowned her pancakes in syrup, more for something to do with her hands than for the taste. Cashin didn't touch his food yet. He only watched her, patient in a way that made her more nervous than anger would have. You knew about me for 12 minutes before we met, she said finally. And now you're acting like you've waited your whole life. I have. The words were simple, raw. You're the first thing I've wanted that wasn't about power or survival. Her fork stilled halfway to her mouth. That honesty was more dangerous than any threat. You make it sound romantic, but it feels like a trap. He leaned back, eyes shadowed. You think I don't know what it means for you? That you didn't ask for this, that it steals choice? I've lived with the bond long enough to know it feels like chains until it feels like fire. You will hate me before you want me. I can live with that. The air between them burned. Sloane swallowed, her appetite gone. And what if I never want you? Then I'll protect you anyway, he said simply. She froze. That wasn't the answer she expected. Why? Because the bond isn't about me. It's about us. Even if you walk away, you'll still be my mate. My wolf won't let me fail you. Something cracked in her chest. A fissure of empathy she didn't want. She wanted to see him as arrogant, dangerous, untouchable. But his voice had carried something else, vulnerability. You're supposed to be ruthless, she whispered. That's what everyone says. I am, Cashin said, no hesitation. To enemies, to rivals, to anyone who touches what's mine. But not to you. Her pulse stumbled. She shoved her plate away, unable to eat another bite. Stop saying that like I belong to you. I don't. He nodded once, slowly. Then let me say it differently. I belong to you. That's what the bond means. Her throat tightened, words clogging there. She looked away, out the window at the neon glow, trying to find air. The diner door chimed. A man in a leather jacket walked in, eyes scanning too deliberately. Another followed, tall and wiry, his jaw tight. The smell hit Sloane before she understood it. Something feral, acrid, like metal shavings in smoke. Cashin's gaze flicked up, sharp as a blade. His whole body went still. The air changed, heavy, electric. They shouldn't be here, he muttered. What do you mean? Rival pack, he said under his breath. They followed us. Her heart slammed. You brought danger to me? I'll end it before it touches you. His voice was steel now. The two men slid into a booth across the room, their eyes never leaving Cashin. The waitress didn't notice, too busy refilling coffee for the nurse in scrubs. But Sloane saw the tension, felt it thrumming in the bond like a wire straining. Cashin rose slowly, every inch of him shifting into something predatory. His eyes gleamed amber in the diner's cheap lighting. "You should go out the back," he told Sloane, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And leave you here?" "Yes." She shook her head, fear and fury colliding. "I'm not running while you—" His hand touched hers, warm and grounding. "Please." That one word, rare and rough, stole her breath. Before she could answer, the taller rival stood, his mouth curling in a grin that showed too many teeth. "Alpha Hail," he said loudly, voice cutting across the clatter of dishes. "Slumming it tonight?" Every head in the diner turned. Sloane's blood ran cold. Cashin's wolf was right there under his skin, and the diner wasn't big enough to hold what was about to break loose. Chapter 3. The diner had gone silent except for the hiss of the griddle and the faint buzz of neon outside. Forks hovered halfway to mouths. Conversations froze. The rival wolf who had spoken took a step closer, the smirk on his face curling like smoke, as if the tension in the room belonged to him. Sloane's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. She wanted to disappear, to fold herself into the shadows of this greasy little place and pretend none of it was real. But the air told her otherwise. The air was alive, heavy with a scent sharp as metal and wild as wet earth. Cashin's scent shifted too, deeper cedar, sharper smoke. His wolf pressed closer to the surface, the way a storm pushes against glass, warning it will shatter. "Sit down," Cashin said, his voice low but carrying. It wasn't a suggestion. It was the command of an alpha, and the entire diner seemed to hear it. The shorter rival laughed, a sound with no humor. "The mighty Hail hiding behind humans now? How far you've fallen." Cashin's eyes burned amber, and Sloane's stomach dropped. The bond between them thrummed, pulling at her, urging her to move, to act, to do anything but sit frozen. "Cashin," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if it was a warning, a plea, or both. He glanced at her, just for a heartbeat, and in that glance she saw the truth. He wasn't afraid, but he was furious. Furious they had dared to step into his space, into his moment with her. Furious they had looked at her at all. Then the taller one moved, too fast for human eyes, too graceful for someone in scuffed boots and a leather jacket. 1 second he was by the booth, the next he was at Cashin's shoulder. Sloane gasped, but Cashin was faster. One hand shot out, caught the rival's wrist mid-swing, and twisted. The crack of bones snapped through the diner, and the man's howl echoed against tile and chrome. Cashin shoved him backward into a table, sending plates and mugs flying. Coffee splattered, glass shattered. Screams erupted. The nurse scrambled to her feet, dragging her bag with her. The teenagers bolted for the door. Even the waitress, gum forgotten, grabbed her purse and ducked behind the counter. The shorter rival lunged. Cashin pivoted, grabbed the man by the front of his jacket, and slammed him into the wall so hard the plaster cracked. His voice was a growl layered with something inhuman when he spoke. "You dare bring your stink into my city?" The rival spat blood, grinning through broken teeth. "We heard the rumors. The alpha found his mate. Thought we'd see if she smelled as sweet as they say." Sloane's blood iced. Every eye in the diner turned toward her. Her heart thrashed, her body screaming to move. Cashin lost the last shred of calm. His fist struck the rival's jaw with bone-shaking force. The man sagged, dazed, but Cashin didn't let go. He leaned close, voice sharp as razors. "You ever speak of her again, I'll tear your throat out before your pack can mourn you." The taller one staggered upright, clutching his broken wrist, eyes wide with a mixture of pain and defiance. "This isn't over, Hale. She's marked by scent already. They'll all know. Every pack will come sniffing." Cashin released the other with a shove. "Tell them this city is mine. Tell them she's under my protection. And if they want to test me, they can join you in the dirt." The two men scrambled out, limping and snarling, disappearing into the night. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving silence thick as smoke. Sloane realized she hadn't breathed properly in minutes. She pressed a shaking hand to her chest. What just happened? Cashin turned back to her, his eyes still glowing faintly, his chest rising and falling with controlled fury. A warning, he said simply. A warning. Her voice cracked. That felt like a war. He crouched by her booth, lowering himself until his face was level with hers, until the storm in his eyes softened just enough. This is what I was trying to keep from you. The bond isn't a secret anymore. They'll smell it on me. On you. They'll come. Her throat closed. Why me? Why would anyone care about me? Because you're mine. The words came fast, raw, almost desperate. Then softer. Because you're Luna now, whether you want it or not. And that makes you powerful. Too powerful for them to ignore. She shook her head, her hands trembling. I don't want power. I want my life back. My job. My apartment. My. Sloane. His hand closed over hers, steadying, grounding. You can still have those things, but you can't unmake what you are. The bond has woken something in you. You'll feel it soon. Strength. Senses. Power you've never had before. She pulled back, fear sparking into anger. Do you even hear yourself? You're telling me I'm changing into something I didn't choose. That because of some cosmic accident. I've lost control of my own body, my own future. He flinched, as if her words were sharper than claws. I know it sounds like a theft, but it isn't. It's an inheritance. And it's yours. Her chest heaved. She looked away, out at the rain-slick street beyond the diner windows, where shadows stretched too long under the neon. I didn't ask for this. No one ever does. Their eyes met again, and for the first time, Sloane saw something fragile in him. Not power, not arrogance. Just a man who had lived too long with the weight of his title and was terrified she might slip through his hands. The waitress peeked over the counter, wide-eyed. You too? Gonna pay for the damages? Cashin reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek black card, and set it on the counter without looking. For the repairs. And for your silence. The woman blinked, then disappeared into the back, muttering something about retiring early. Sloane stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. She needed air, needed space before the walls collapsed on her. She pushed past Cashin, through the door and into the night. The city felt different. The air sharper, the shadows deeper. She could hear footsteps a block away, a car engine revving 3 streets over, the rush of water in the storm drains. Too much, all at once. She staggered, grabbing the lamppost for balance. What's happening to me? She whispered. Cashin's hand settled gently on her back. Your senses are waking. The bond is stirring what's in your blood. You're not just human anymore. Her stomach lurched. She shoved his hand away, spinning to face him. Don't say that. Don't you dare say that. It's the truth, he said, quiet but unyielding. And soon you won't be able to ignore it. Her vision blurred with tears, hot and furious. I hate you for this. His jaw tightened. I'll take your hate if it keeps you alive. The bond thrummed between them, fierce and relentless. Even as she turned and walked away, Cashin watched her go, his wolf howling inside his chest, knowing she could run as far as she wanted. Fate would still bring her back. And fate, cruel and unmerciful, had already set the next move in motion. Chapter 4. Sloane didn't remember walking home. Her feet carried her there through streets that blurred into one long smear of rain and headlights. By the time she fumbled her keys into the lock, her hands were shaking so badly she dropped them twice. She slammed the door shut behind her, twisted the deadbolt, and pressed her back to the wood like she could keep the whole world out if she just leaned hard enough. Silence pressed close, too close. She could hear the hum of her refrigerator, the soft tick of the radiator, the distant bark of Toby's dog on the floor below. All of it was too loud, too sharp. It pressed against her ears until she covered them with her palms. Her body wasn't her own. Her senses throbbed, raw and electric, every nerve stretched too thin. She staggered to the bathroom and flipped on the light. The woman in the mirror didn't look like her. Her eyes, still the same hazel she'd lived with her whole life, glimmered faintly under the fluorescent bulb. Not glowing, not yet, but alive like some. The bond tugged at her chest, insistent, alive, pulling her toward something she didn't want to need. A knock at the door jolted her upright. Her first thought was Cashin. Of course he'd follow. Of course he'd find her. She stomped into the living room, every step shaky with adrenaline, and hissed through the door. Go away. It's Val. Her cousin's voice, trembling. Sloane froze. Then she yanked the door open. Val stood there with her hoodie soaked through, eyes wide. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation and dropped onto the couch. Do you realize people are posting about what happened at Frankie's? Somebody filmed it. It's online. Sloane's stomach sank. Oh God. It's grainy, Val rushed on. And you're just a blur in the background. But Cashin Hale breaking a guy's jaw in a diner? That's not exactly subtle. Sloane collapsed into the chair opposite. He said they followed him. Rival pack. Val hugged her knees. This is insane. You're just you. You pay bills late and you eat cereal for dinner. You're not supposed to be in the middle of some werewolf gang war. Sloane barked out a laugh that was half a sob. Tell that to the universe. It doesn't care. Val's eyes softened. Are you okay? No, Sloane admitted. Everything feels wrong. Loud. My skin. She broke off, shaking her head. It's like I'm not me anymore. Val didn't flinch. She just leaned forward, gripping Sloane's hands. Then we figure it out. Together. Sloane wanted to believe her, wanted to cling to the comfort of family, of the one person who had always been steady. But even as Val's hands held hers, the bond thrummed again, dragging her thoughts back to Cashin. And that was when the window rattled. Both women jerked their heads toward it. The curtains stirred though the window was shut. A shadow passed across the glass. Sloane's breath caught. Val whispered, "What the hell was that?" Sloane stood, every nerve screaming. She pulled the curtain back. Amber eyes stared in at her from the fire escape. Her heart stopped. It wasn't Cashin. The eyes were wrong. Too yellow, too sharp. The shape outside was leaner, gaunter, with a grin too wide to be human. The scent hit her next. Acrid, metallic. Rival. Before she could react, the window shattered inward. Glass sprayed across the floor. Val screamed. The intruder landed inside, crouched low, teeth bared. Sloane stumbled back, dragging Val with her. Her pulse thundered, panic clawing her throat. And then something inside her snapped. Heat roared through her veins, searing, unstoppable. Her vision sharpened, colors too bright, edges too crisp. Her hearing expanded, catching the ragged breath of the intruder, the rush of blood in Val's veins, the thrum of her own heart pounding like a drum of war. Her hands curled into fists, nails biting deep into her palms. The air vibrated around her as if the city itself was holding its breath. The rival lunged. Sloane moved. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She just let the power surge. Her arm swung, her palm connecting with his chest, and the force sent him flying back into the wall. The plaster cracked. The man crumpled, groaning, stunned. Val gaped at her. Sloane, what did you? I don't know. Sloane gasped, her body trembling with the aftershock of strength she shouldn't have. The intruder staggered to his feet, blood trickling from his temple. His grin widened, sharp and ugly. So it's true, he rasped. The alpha's mate is waking. Sloane's stomach lurched. Before he could move again, the apartment door crashed open. Cashin stood there, eyes blazing. His wolf so close to the surface his growl rolled through the room like thunder. Get away from her. The rival spat blood, his gaze darting between Sloane and Cashin. Then, with a mocking bow, He leapt back through the broken window and vanished into the night. Cashin crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands gripping Sloane's shoulders, his gaze raking over her. "Are you hurt?" No, I don't think so." Her body still shook, her breath uneven. "But Cashin, I threw him. I shouldn't have been able to do that." His eyes softened, though his hands remained firm on her shoulders. "I told you, the bond wakes what's in your blood. You're changing, Sloane." Her throat closed, terror rising like bile. "I don't want to change. You don't have a choice." His voice was quiet but unyielding. "But you do have me. I'll guide you. I'll keep you safe." Val stood frozen, her wide eyes darting between them. "Sloane. What the hell is happening?" Sloane met Cashin's gaze, her voice breaking. "Tell her. Tell me. All of it. No more half-truths." Cashin exhaled, his jaw tight. "Then you'll hear everything. Tonight." The bond hummed between them, alive, unrelenting. Outside, somewhere in the city, a wolf howled. Long and low, a warning that this was only the beginning. Chapter 5. The apartment looked like a crime scene. Shards of glass glittering on the carpet, the window frame hanging crooked, plaster crumbling where the intruder had hit the wall. Val sat huddled on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, a blanket around her shoulders though she still shivered. Sloane stood in the middle of the room, arms wrapped around herself, her breath shallow, like she was afraid the wrong inhale might shatter what was left of her sanity. Cashin closed the door he'd broken open, the new deadbolt useless now. He stood with his back to it for a long moment, his chest rising and falling as if he, too, needed to gather strength. His eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and even though his control was iron, Sloane could feel the storm of his wolf beneath his skin. "Talk," she said. Her voice cracked, but her spine stayed straight. "You promised." Cashin nodded once. He moved to the chair opposite the couch, lowering himself slowly, deliberately, as if he were aware of how large he was, how dangerous, how fragile everything in the room felt. "What you saw tonight wasn't the beginning," he said. "It's the echo of a war that's been brewing for years." Val shifted under the blanket. "A war? With what, wolves? Packs? That sounds insane." "It is insane," Cashin agreed, his gaze steady. "Insane and true." Sloane's heart thudded. "Start with me." "Why me? Why am I changing?" Cashin studied her for a long moment, then leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because your blood isn't only human. One of your parents carried wolf heritage. Not strong enough to shift, not strong enough to awaken, until now. The mate bond woke it." Sloane's throat closed. "That's impossible. My mom worked double shifts at the hospital and sang in the church choir. My dad left when I was little, but he was just ordinary." "Ordinary doesn't survive the bond," Cashin said softly. "If your mother was human, then your father wasn't." Sloane stumbled back, shaking her head. No, you're wrong. My mom would have told me. Or she thought she was protecting you," Cashin countered gently. "Hiding you from this world until you were old enough to live without it." Val lowered her blanket, her voice small. "Sloane, do you remember when we were kids? You used to hear things before anyone else did. You'd say the ice cream truck was coming 2 blocks away, and then 5 minutes later it showed up. You'd run faster than anyone in school, even the boys. You thought it was funny." Sloane's breath caught. Memories she had buried flickered to life. The way her legs had carried her too fast, too sure. How she had pretended to be normal because normal was safe. Cashin's voice softened further, threading through the storm of her thoughts. "The bond doesn't lie. It's not just fate, it's recognition. Your blood knew me before your mind did. That's why it feels like fire when we're apart." Sloane pressed her hands to her temples. "So what? I'm supposed to just accept that I'm half-wolf? That my father was some creature?" "Not a creature," Cashin said. "A man with a wolf inside him. Like me. Like you will be." Her knees buckled, and she dropped into the chair by the window. The broken glass crunched beneath her feet. "I can't do this." "You can," he said firmly. "And you don't have to do it alone." Silence pressed down, heavy with truths too sharp to swallow. Finally, Sloane lifted her gaze, her hazel eyes trembling. "And the others? The ones who broke in tonight? Why are they after me?" Because the moment the bond awakened, they felt it. Cashin's jaw tightened. Power draws power. An alpha with a fated mate is stronger, more dangerous. They want to break us before we can claim each other. Sloane shuddered. "Break us? You mean kill me?" His eyes burned brighter, molten with fury. "They won't touch you. I swear it." Val leaned forward. "You're saying she's a target just for existing?" Cashin didn't flinch. "Yes, which is why she needs protection. Which is why she needs me." Sloane's laugh was hollow. "You talk like protection is love." "It's both," he said simply. "I don't separate them." Her chest ached at the conviction in his voice. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him to leave her alone. But the bond pulsed between them, undeniable, alive, tugging at her even as she resisted. Val stood abruptly, tossing the blanket aside. "I'm calling the cops. If someone broke in, we should file a report." "No," Cashin's tone was iron. Val blinked. "Excuse me? The police can't stop what's coming," he said. "They'll write a report, file it under burglary, and you'll never hear from them again. Meanwhile, rival packs will circle closer, and every time you walk out your door, you'll be in danger." Sloane shot to her feet. "So what, you're saying I'm trapped? That my only option is to crawl under your wing and let you decide everything for me?" His jaw clenched. "I'm saying you have a choice. Stay here and risk everything, or let me teach you how to survive what you are becoming." Her breath hitched. "And if I refuse? Then I'll still protect you," Cashin said quietly. "Even if it kills me." The bond thrummed hard, heat racing through her chest. She hated that it shook her, hated that his vow sounded like truth carved into stone. Val looked between them, her face pale. "Sloane, I think he's right. Not about the love stuff, but about the danger. You saw what you did tonight. You threw a grown man across the room like he was nothing." Sloane wrapped her arms around herself. "I didn't mean to. I didn't even think." "That's the point," Cashin said. "It's in you. And if you don't learn to control it, it will control you." Her eyes burned. She wanted to argue, but the memory of the rival's body hitting the wall replayed in her mind. The raw strength that had surged through her veins like fire. Finally, she whispered, "If I let you teach me, what happens then?" Cashin's gaze softened, though his voice remained steady. "Then you'll learn who you are. You'll learn how to fight, how to defend yourself, how to live with what's in your blood. And one day, when you're ready, you'll decide if you want to claim the bond or reject it." Her heart stuttered. "Reject it?" He nodded. "The bond is fate, but it isn't slavery. You can refuse me. You can break it. It will tear me apart. But the choice will be yours." The room went silent. Val's mouth dropped open. Sloane's eyes widened, stunned. For the first time, the chains she felt loosened, even if only a little. "Why would you give me that choice?" she whispered. "Because love without choice isn't love," Cashin said, his voice raw. "And because you deserve more than fate's decree. You deserve freedom." Her throat ached. Tears pricked at her eyes. She turned away before he could see them, staring out at the broken city lights through her shattered window. Somewhere in the distance, another wolf howled. Closer this time, sharper, hungrier. Cashin stood, his shadow stretching long across the room. "They won't stop. Not until we stop them." Sloane closed her eyes, the bond burning like a live wire inside her. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she hated it, or if she was afraid of what it might mean to need him. And that terrified her most of all. Chapter 6. They met at dawn, when the city's noise hadn't learned its choreography yet and the river wore a skin of fog. Sloane stood on the cracked asphalt of an old boat launch 2 neighborhoods from her apartment, breath clouding in the pale cold. She wore running shoes and a hoodie with thumbholes that gave her something to hold onto when her hands shook. Cashin stood 10 paces away, a dark figure against the soft, pewter light, and for a fragile stretch of seconds it almost felt like they were just 2 people trying to be brave about mourning. He didn't crowd her. She noticed it immediately. The deliberate space, the way he anchored himself in the open, hands visible, shoulders lowered. It was a choreography of respect, and it shouldn't have mattered as much as it did. "You chose outside," he said, eyes skimming the tree line, the open slab of river. "Good. I needed sky," she said. "Walls feel like they're listening." He nodded like he understood. "There are 3 things we deal with first: breath, focus, and edges. Breath keeps you from blowing yourself apart. Focus tells your power where to go. Edges are the line between using it and letting it use you. And if I cross the line, you won't," he said. "Not with me here." The confidence should have grated, steadied her instead. He gestured toward the river. "Listen." "I can hear the water," she said, thinking he meant the obvious. "Not just the water. Listen underneath." She closed her eyes because that was the only way to shut out the broadness of him, the gold of his eyes, the way the bond pulled at her like a tide. She listened. Air moved over the river in ribbons. A gull scolded from the pilings. Farther off, a truck growled awake, tires hissing. Closer. She stilled. Something small skittered under the brush, a heartbeat quick and nervous. Her hearing stretched, thinned, caught threads of sound she would have called imagination a week ago. "Good," Cashin said softly. "Now push your breath down to your belly. Slow. Count to 4 in. Hold 2. 6 out." She followed him and felt her bones stop buzzing one by one like someone flipping off lights in rooms she wasn't using. The cold no longer bit, it clarified. "What about the edges?" she asked. His mouth flickered, a ghost of a smile. "Come on." He led her along a path that broke from the boat launch and twisted into a narrow strip of scrub. It opened onto a pocket of field, ankle-high grass gone winter pale, a fringe of saplings, a rusted basketball hoop tipped like a question at the far end. Someone's forgotten playground for secrets. "This is safe ground," he said. "No cameras. No neighbors. I bought the surrounding lots last year. I keep it quiet. You bought a meadow. I buy what I can't afford to lose," he said, and didn't look away from her when he said it. She swallowed. "Okay, teach me." He started with balance. "Your center is lower than you think," he said, stepping behind her. Not touching, only mirroring. "Plant your feet under your hips, knees soft, spine tall, like there's a cord pulling you through the crown of your head." He demonstrated, fluid, precise. "You've always moved like gravity owes you a favor. Now we make gravity a partner." She mimicked him, adjusting when he told her to rotate her right foot a fraction, to drop her shoulders, to loosen her jaw. The smallest changes unlatched something inside her stance. She felt taller. She felt truer. "Now we pull on the thread," he said. "Not all of it. Just enough." She lifted her palm the way she'd done in panic the night before. Fear skittered up her throat. "What if I break something I can't fix?" "Then I'll fix it," he said. "I told you edges. We find them. We mark them. You'll know how close you're standing to the drop before you ever take a step." "How?" "By paying attention to what the body says before the mind lies," he said quietly. "Heat behind the eyes, buzz in the wrists, the way your tongue presses to the roof of your mouth. These are the tells." She waited. The morning seemed to lean in with her. The bond hummed. Less a shout now, more a chord tuning itself. "Pick a target," he said. "Something small. That bottle." He had set a plastic water bottle on a cinder block 20 feet away. It seemed insultingly easy to walk over and flick it. That, she realized, was the point. "Breath," he reminded. 4. Hold. 6. She breathed, lifted her hand, and thought not about power or terror or how his eyes warmed when she got something right, but about the simple geometry of a thing becoming slightly lighter. Not flung, not smashed, just persuaded. The bottle trembled. Sloane's breath hitched and the bottom dropped out of what she was doing. The bottle steadied. Good, he said. Again. They worked like that until the light turned from pewter to sand. She learned that power wasn't a roar. It was a dial. She learned that anger made her sloppy and fear made her brittle. But curiosity? Curiosity let her thread a needle. The bottle toppled with a soft pat against dead grass and Sloane laughed, bright and rusty, like she didn't do it often enough. His answering smile was small and unguarded, and it shook something loose in her. For a heartbeat, she wasn't terrified of him. She was terrified of what she wanted. They moved. Cashin taught her how to step with the outside edges of her feet when she wanted silent speed, how to angle her body to make herself harder to hit, how to fall without cracking her skull. Tuck the chin, round the back, become a will not a plank. He fed her simple drills. Palms up to feel pressure and redirect it, forearms to block, elbows as tools not weapons unless they had to be. When he touched her, it was with care that felt like reverence. When she stumbled, he let her find her own footing before he offered a hand. Again, he'd say, and she'd do it. Sweat slicked her spine, a clean heat. The cold couldn't get in anymore. They broke when the sun tipped 2 fingers above the warehouses. He tossed her a towel and a bottle, the bottle. You did that, he said. On purpose. She twisted the cap and drank, throat aching in that pleasant, used way. If I can knock over a bottle and not a building, that's progress. That's control, he said. We'll build power on top of it. Her phone buzzed. Val, you alive? I made coffee that could clean engines. Also, there's a suspicious SUV on our block. Jax? Sloane thumbed a reply, probably. Don't let anyone in. I'll be back soon, and slid the phone away. Security on your building, Cashin said, not pretending he didn't know. Rivals don't announce a war on the internet and then go home and nap. Is that what last night was? An announcement. A probe, he said. They wanted to know if you're awakening or if I'm just obsessed. His mouth tightened. Now they know both. She walked a slow circle, letting her pulse ease. The field smelled like frostbitten grass and sunlight bruised by diesel. You said edges. Breath, focus, edges. What are my edges? He looked at her without blinking, like he was taking a vow. You love hard. You hate when someone tells you who you are. You think control is safety, which means losing it feels like death. You're brave when no one is watching. You're terrified of needing anyone. And you will burn down a city for the people you call yours. Knocked the window you. They were quiet. A train hooted on the far side of the warehouses, low and mournful. Sloane could have lived in the quiet for a while, but her phone vibrated again. Val, you have a voicemail from a number labeled Ms. Donnelly. I didn't listen. Okay, I listened to the first second by accident. She sounded like a robot, but in a good way. Sloane's stomach swooped. Interview. Check it, Cashin said, stepping back, making space again like it was a language he was trying to learn. She put the call on speaker because her hands had gone clumsy with hope. Ms. Donnelly's voice was crisp enough to shave with. Miss Avery, thank you for your time yesterday. The panel was impressed. If you're interested, we'd like to start you on a 3-month contract as a site analyst, with the option to extend. Email to follow. She didn't realize she was smiling until her cheeks hurt. Yes, she breathed to the empty air. Yes, I'm interested. Cashin's eyes warmed like sunrise finding a window. Congratulations. I did that, she said, a little wild with relief. Me. Not a Bond. Not a wolf. Me. You, he agreed. Always you. The warmth lasted all of 30 seconds. A prickling ran along her skin, not inside this time but from the field's edge, like static reaching with mean fingers. Cashin's head snapped to the right at the same moment. The fog off the river shifted, not wind but weight. Car. he said, already moving. Down. Sloane didn't think. She was on her belly in the grass behind the low break of a berm before the black sedan rolled to a stop on the cracked access road 20 yards away. It looked like any other car until 3 doors opened in sequence and men stepped out too smoothly for ordinary muscle. No scent carried on the damp air at first. Smart, Sloane registered distantly. They'd driven windows up, vents closed. But then the wind shifted and she got it in pieces. Oil and burnt sugar and the metallic tang she was learning to hate. Cashin didn't look back at her. Rule 1, he said, voice pitched low enough that it took her new hearing to catch it. You don't run unless I tell you to run. You don't fight unless I tell you to fight. You get behind me and stay. Her mouth went dry. And you? I make sure there's a later. The leader of the trio, a man in his 40s with a scar lancing his eyebrow, lifted a hand empty of weapons. Alpha hail, he called conversationally. Mornings are for coffee, not fields. You're hard to track when you choose not to be. Tell me, are we intruding on a date? Cashin's smile was almost bored. This is the part where you say the part where you leave. Scar laughed and glanced at Sloane. Not directly. Sideways, sly. We only came to talk. Neighborly, like. There's concern about balance. You understand balance, surely. When an alpha strengthens himself, others must assess. For fairness. You came to measure my throat, Cashin said, no heat in it. And hers. Scar's eyes gleamed. Not her throat. Her spine. Sloane's fingers curled in the grass. Her pulse thudded. Not the panicked flutter of last night, but something deeper, steadier, angrier. Her spine was fine. You've had your look, Cashin said. Now you go. Tell your master the next time he sends you, he should send men who can count. Scar's gaze ticked back, curious. Count. Wolves, Cashin said, and then there were 2 of his own stepping from the tree line like the field had grown them. Jack's among them and a woman Sloane had never seen, lean and watchful with hair braided tight against her skull. They moved without noise, without announcing themselves, until the odds weren't 3-2 anymore. Scar's mouth tightened. We're not on your land. You're in my city, Cashin said. It's all my land. Scar weighed something in the air and came up empty. Message delivered, he said finally, chalking retreat as strategy. Enjoy your meadow. They backed to the car in that particular way men do when they don't want to say they're relieved to be leaving alive. The sedan rolled off the field, remembering how to be a field. Sloane let breath out she hadn't been aware of holding and pushed to her feet, grass seeds clinging to her knees. Jax nodded to her once, respect, not pity, and melted back toward the trees with the woman, as if the day hadn't tilted. They'll be back, she said. Cashin didn't soften the truth. Yes. Then we keep training, she said, surprising herself with how even it came out. He scanned her face, as if expecting fear's aftershock. What he saw instead made something in him ease, just a fraction. We keep training. They worked until the sun was fully up and the fog had burned off to a silver that made the river look like a blade. He showed her how to still her hands when adrenaline made them ring, how to channel the surge through larger muscles so she didn't blow the hinges off her own joints. He asked her to close her eyes and find him in the field without sound, to orient on his scent not as a lure but as an anchor. The first time she reached for him with that new sense it made her dizzy. How immediate he was. Cedar and winter and the particular salt of his skin that hit her throat like a promise. Again, he said, voice roughened in a way that made heat flood her cheeks. I found you, she shot back, opening her eyes. Don't pretend I didn't. You did, he said. Fast. It should have been just training. It wasn't. Every small success put a chip of pride in her pocket. Every correction he gave without impatience made her braver. Somewhere between drop your shoulder and good. The air between them changed. Not a lurch but a tilt. They took water on the sideline, not touching, not needing to. She watched a bead slide from his jaw to his throat and wanted to lick it away. The thought jolted her like static. He felt it. She knew he did. The Bond plucked one string and both of them heard the note. He set the bottle down slowly. "Sloane," he said. Warning and invitation braided into a single syllable. She could have stepped back. She didn't. She stepped into his space one pace and stopped there, close enough to see the flecks of darker brown in the amber, close enough for his scent to go from weather to skin. "Tell me something true," she said, the words leaving her on a breath she didn't remember taking. "Something no one else gets." He held her gaze, not willing to steal anything from a moment it took both of them to build. "I hate mornings," he said. "The Alpha gets up at 4. Cashin wants to sleep until 8 and Red. I pretend it doesn't matter which one wins." She didn't smile, felt too fragile to move her mouth. "I sleep with a light on when Val's away," she confessed. "I tell myself it's for plants." He exhaled, a quiet thing that carried more relief than it had any right to. "Thank you for telling me." She was the one who reached first. Fingers, not mouth. The edge of his jaw, not the heat of his lip. His stubble rasped her skin, and the sound of his breath catching felt like the click of a lock that had always been waiting to close. He didn't move. He let her map a line from jaw to throat with the back of her knuckles like she was learning a country by touch. "If I kiss you," she said, voice low, "does that make it harder to walk away later?" "Yes," he said, honest like always. She should have stopped. She rose onto her toes and pressed her mouth to his anyway. Nothing in stories tells you how quiet a first kiss can be when the world has been so loud. It wasn't fireworks. It was gravity. His hand cupped the back of her neck, warm, open, a man anchoring not taking. Her lips parted. His did too. The bond didn't surge so much as settle. She felt the length of him like a line down her body, not aggressive, not caged, present. When she pulled back, he didn't chase her. He stood there and took a breath like a man who'd been underwater a very long time. She laughed softly, a little stunned. "You do know how to restrain yourself." "I told you I would," he said, voice rougher than it had been. "You set the pace. I keep it." The part of her that catalogued edges put a pin in that. The part of her that had been a body all along simply hummed. Her phone vibrated again. "Val, update." The SUV did a slow roll twice and left. "I have ordered an unholy amount of pad thai. Also, Ms. Donnelly emailed, contract attached. Don't sign anything until I read it. Lawyer hat on. Love you, don't die." Sloane typed back, "Alive. Training. Will bring coffee. Save me noodles." Then to Cashin, "I need to sign a contract and explain to my cousin how morning turned into this." He scrubbed a hand over his face like maybe he, too, was learning what this meant. "I'll have Jax put 2 people on your block in shifts. He'll be a shadow. You won't see him unless you need him." "I don't want to live in a cage with a prettier name," she said quietly. "You won't," he said. "You're not the one who gets locked up." "Who is?" "Anyone who comes for you." They left the field the way they'd come. At the boat launch he stopped, not quite saying goodbye because that wasn't the word a Bond used, but finding something close. "I'll be at the office until late," he said. "Mayor. 2 council people. A man who thinks zoning laws are a suggestion. Call if you need me. Call if you don't." "That's not how phone etiquette works," she said, because banter was easier than the ache under her sternum. "It is now." She turned, started away, then paused. "Cashin?" He stilled, that subtle go still that meant the wolf was listening too. "I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted, the words feeling like stepping onto ice and trusting it would hold. "But I'm trying." His answer was unadorned. "So am I." By afternoon, the city remembered how to be itself again. Sloane and Val sat cross-legged on the floor with 2 laptops. For pens, a packet of highlighters, and a spread of takeout containers whose steam fogged the bottom edge of Sloane's repaired window. Jax's locksmith had come and gone. The new deadbolt closed like a promise. "Clause 12 is sneaky," Val muttered, chewing her lip. "They call it a quality assurance review. but it lets them cut you loose after 30 days if you refuse to work unpaid overtime. I can bully it. Please bully it, Sloane said, circling a paragraph. The rhythm of contract markup soothed the part of her that still wanted to run until her lungs turned inside out. They were 3 pages into indemnity when Sloane's head lifted like a hound's. She didn't move otherwise, didn't even breathe. It would have been comical if the look on her face hadn't emptied all the blood from Val's. What? Val whispered. Do you hear that? Sloane asked. Hear what? The world slid into layers for Sloane. Outside noise, inside noise, the thread between them. She focused on the outside: tires, a skateboard clack, the elevator's groan. Under it, a whine high intermittent. She knew car engines now like she'd been raised in a shop. This one didn't fit their block. Too smooth. Waiting. Get away from the window, she said. Val didn't ask why. They crab-walked to the kitchen and crouched behind the island. It felt ridiculous until a shadow moved across the living room, slow and deliberate, like a hand testing the shape of a door it intended to own. Sloane's mouth went desert dry. She texted Jax with hands that didn't shake. Visitor. East window. Floor 3. Then, because she was learning edges, she closed her eyes and reached for that new sense the way she had in the field. Curiosity, not fear. What came back wasn't sent through glass. Too much wind, too much exhaust, but mood. Whoever was out there wasn't jittery like the break-in wolf. He was patient. He thought patience meant clever. Her phone buzzed in her palm. Jax. 2 minutes. 2 minutes could hold a disaster. Sloane made a choice that would have scared her yesterday. She stood. Sloane. Val hissed. No. I won't open it, Sloane said, absurd and fierce at once. I'm going to tell them we're not prey. She stepped into the living room. The shadow froze, like it hadn't expected the deer to turn and bare teeth. Sloane drew breath down to her belly and stepped to the side of the window where no line of sight could catch her. Quietly, she lifted the sash 6 inches. Wrong address, she said to the space outside, voice steady. Wrong woman. Silence. Then a male voice, velvety in the way poison can be smooth. We haven't been introduced. We won't be, she said. You think you can hide behind that alpha forever? He asked, amusement threading through. I don't hide, she said, and it surprised her that it was true. I train. A soft laugh. He's making you cocky. He's making me ready. Ready for what? For the day I don't have to wait for him, she said, and closed the window quietly as a prayer. Someone out there considered violence. She felt the choice as a temperature change. Then the air shifted in a different way. Footsteps she recognized now as professional. Jax's knock that wasn't a knock but a rhythm he'd made her memorize that morning. The shadow left like smoke. Sloane waited 10 breaths, then opened the door on Jax's impassive face and the woman from the field, who, up close, had sea-glass eyes and a scar drawn neat across her chin. Name's May, the woman said, giving Val a nod that was almost a bow. We'll be in the hall. You need anything, you open this door or you scream loud. I'll hear you from 2 floors down. Val stared. That's not creepy at all. May's mouth ticked. Welcome to Tuesday. When the hall was empty, Val sagged against the island. I hate this. I know, Sloane said, threading fingers through Val's. Me too. You didn't look scared. I was. You didn't smell scared, Val said, then slapped a hand over her mouth, mortified. I can't believe I said that. Sloane laughed, shaky and real. Maybe I didn't. They finished the contract. They made notes in margins and ate noodles straight from the cartons and pretended the world could be ordinary if you fed it enough carbs. The pretense worked until dusk, when the block put on its night habits and Sloane's body decided it wanted out again. I need to run, she said. Not far. I'll come, Val said instantly. Sloane looked at her. One of us should be the person who calls the other person's mother if things go sideways. Low blow, Val muttered, but she picked up a pen and scrawled on a sticky note. Back in 30. If not, Cashin. She stuck it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a lemon. Sloane laced shoes, zipped a jacket, nodded to May in the hall, and took the stairs 2 at a time. Outside, the air had the bite of a season that hadn't made up its mind. She stretched until her muscles felt like they remembered trust, then set off. She didn't sprint. She let her body choose pace the way a song chooses volume. The city slid past in chapters. Bodega cat on a milk crate throne. A couple arguing gently about garlic. A bus sighing as if bored by its own route. She ran along the river path because the water made noise that washed other noises clean. She had learned something else in the field, something Cashin hadn't said out loud. When she ran, the bond stopped feeling like a tug and started feeling like a companion. Not pressure, presence. Not come here. I'm here. She turned at the old iron footbridge 2 miles out and almost missed the scent. Not the rivals. Pine and rain and a thread of smoke. She slowed. He stepped from the shadow of a mural that had once been bright as a bruise. I thought you had the mayor, she said, breath fogging, amusement and accusation braided tight. I did, he said. He wants the port. We want the river not to flood the South District. I won. Of course you did. I came for this, he said, and tapped his chest lightly, just above his heart. Your cardio? My sanity. It should have felt like a violation that he found her here. Didn't. Felt like a promise being kept. They fell into step without deciding to. Her pace, his stride shortened to match. They ran without talking for a while, feet finding the rhythm that floats. Someone came to the window this afternoon, she said when her breath was steady enough. I told him to leave. The growl under his answer wasn't human. Names. No introduction, she said. Voice like velvet. Patience like a hobby. Velvet, he muttered, filing it. I'll send May a set of photos. You point if you recognize. She already makes me feel like I joined a secret order. You did, he said. You founded it. They rounded a bend where the path narrowed between chain link and river. A couple approached, heads bent together. Sloane and Cashin stepped single file to let them pass. When they were alone again, he said, Do you want me to stop coming like this? To wait for invitations only? I meant what I said about pace. She thought about it because he'd earned that level of honesty. I want you to keep showing up, she said finally, the truth like a coin placed carefully in his palm. Just don't break into my apartment to do it. I won't, he said, and there was a smile in it. They ran back to her block. He peeled off half a street early without drama. A ghost of cedar on the air. She watched him go and didn't call him back. She didn't need to. That was new and it felt like strength. Upstairs, Val was asleep on the couch with a highlighter stuck to her cheek. May had left a note under the door. Found velvet voice. Name Corin Vale. Lieutenant to North Bank Alpha. Doesn't like getting his hands dirty. Likes to make other people do it. Below it, a number to text if Sloane wanted photos. Neat block letters. Useful information. No fuss. Sloane tucked the note into the contract folder and stood by the window a long time. The city was a map under sodium lights. Streets as arteries. Windows as small hearts beating for their own stories. She thought about breath, focus, edges. She thought about a bottle tipping. A kiss that was gravity. A voice through glass that thought patience would scare her. Didn't. Her phone buzzed once on the sill. A text without flourish. Sleep. You did well today. She typed back, you too. Don't let the alpha make Cashin get up at 4. A beat. Then he listens to you. She smiled into the dark, turned off the lamp, and left a night light on for the plants. When she slept, she dreamed, not of being chased, but of running toward something and discovering it was running toward her at the same speed. And somehow, impossibly, the angles met without collision. Outside, somewhere in the web of streets, Corin Vale made a patient face in a mirror and practiced Sloane's name like he wanted to own it. Downriver, Men in a warehouse talked numbers and forgot that numbers mean nothing to teeth. In the field by the boat launch, frost wrote its quiet script on dead grass and waited to be kicked up by morning feet. Morning would come. When it did, Sloane would meet it. Not as a woman avoiding a story, but as someone writing one with breath and bone and the bright, terrifying mercy of choice. Chapter 7. The following morning dawned with a hard, clean sky, the kind of blue that made the city's edges sharper. Sloane woke to sunlight across her bedspread and the low murmur of Val on the phone in the kitchen. For a brief, stolen moment, she let herself believe she was ordinary again. Just a woman with a new contract waiting in her inbox, the faint scent of coffee in the air, and her cousin fussing over breakfast. But then her body reminded her. Like a drumbeat she couldn't turn off. She sat up, pressing her palms to her eyes. There was no going back. When she emerged into the kitchen, Val shoved a plate of toast toward her. Eat. You look like you're surviving on adrenaline and sarcasm. I am, Sloane said, but she sat and picked at the toast anyway. Val was mid-lecture about contract negotiations when the knock came. Not the rhythm Jax had taught her. A different one. Sloane froze. Val's eyes widened. That's not your Wolfguard friend, is it? No. She stood slowly, every nerve on high alert, and approached the door. Who is it? A pause. Then a voice she didn't recognize, smooth and cool. Package for Sloane Avery. Her skin prickled. Leave it. Another pause. Then, Miss Avery, refusing to open the door won't make this less inevitable. Val's face drained of color. That's not UPS. The words had barely left her mouth before the door shuddered violently, the frame splintering under pressure. Sloane stumbled back as Val screamed. The deadbolt held for now. Sloane! The voice wasn't from outside. It was in her head. Cashin's voice, raw and urgent through the bond. Stay away from the door. I'm coming. Her heart slammed. How do you? I felt it. His presence was so strong she almost turned, expecting to see him in the room. Keep Val behind you. Don't open that door. The pounding intensified. The hinges groaned. Val grabbed Sloane's arm. We have to get out. Sloane's instincts roared. Run. Hide. Survive. But another instinct rose with it. The new one, the one that had woken when she'd thrown a grown man into a wall. Power curled hot and electric in her belly, demanding release. The frame cracked. A hand shoved through, claws glinting where nails should have been. Val shrieked. Sloane's body moved before her mind could catch up. She thrust her palm forward, and the air itself seemed to answer. A blast of force slammed the intruder back against the hallway wall with a crunch. The entire building shivered. Val gaped. Holy! Stay down! Sloane barked, her voice trembling with power she didn't understand. The door burst inward. The man from the night before, Corin Vale, she realized with a chill, stepped through, brushing plaster dust off his coat as if he hadn't just been hurled like a rag doll. His smile was thin and cruel. Impressive, he said smoothly. No wonder Cashin is so territorial. Sloane's pulse thundered. Get out. Corin tilted his head. Oh, I will. But not before you hear me out. His eyes flicked to Val, who was pressed into the corner, pale but defiant. You've got family here. Sweet. Vulnerable. Easy to misplace. Rage boiled hot in Sloane's chest. Don't touch her. I don't have to. Not if you come with me. Her stomach twisted. Why would I do that? Because your alpha doesn't deserve you, Corin said smoothly. Cashin Hale destroys everything he claims. Business rivals, political allies, mates. You think you'll be different? You're not. You're leverage. To him, you're a weapon in a pretty shell. That's a lie, she spat. His grin widened. Is it? Or is it exactly what you're afraid of? The bond burned in her chest, pulsing with Cashin's fury from miles away. Don't listen to him. I'm almost there. Corin's eyes narrowed, like he sensed it. Ah, He's in your head, isn't he? Always in your head. Always tugging, pulling, binding. You think that's love? That's chains. Her hands trembled, heat building in her palms, begging for release. Get out, she repeated, her voice shaking with power. He stepped closer, unfazed. Or what? You'll throw me again? Do it. Prove you're his little wolf already. The heat surged. She lifted her hand, and Cashin crashed through what was left of the door. He hit Corin mid-step, slamming him into the wall with a force that rattled the entire floor. The two men collided like storms, growls reverberating deep and inhuman. Cashin's wolf was so close to the surface his teeth lengthened, his eyes blazing gold. Touch her again, he snarled, and I'll end you where you stand. Corin only laughed, even pinned, his voice a rasp. You're already losing, Hale. She's waking, and when she chooses, it won't be you. Cashin's fist drove into his ribs with a sickening crack. Corin crumpled but managed a mocking bow before slipping back through the wreckage of the doorway, vanishing into the hallway shadows. For a moment, the only sound was Cashin's ragged breathing and the pounding of Sloane's heart. Then Val whispered, voice shaky but sure, "He's not going to stop, is he?" Cashin turned, his chest heaving, his eyes still glowing faint. No, not until I end him. Sloane stood frozen, power still sparking under her skin, her gaze locked on Cashin. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she was more terrified of what had just broken into her home, or of the bond that had made her powerful enough to fight back. Chapter 8. The apartment smelled like dust and split wood and the copper tang of fear. Val pressed a dish towel to her mouth as if it could filter the world into something manageable. Sloane stood rooted where the door had been, her hands still buzzing with the echo of power. Cashin's shoulders rose and fell, the glow fading from his eyes by degrees, human returning like a tide that didn't quite trust the shore. You okay? He asked, voice roughened, too calm to be anything but purposeful. Sloane nodded once, then again because her body needed momentum to keep from shaking. Val. I'm fine, Val lied, lowering the towel to show a determined mouth and trembling chin. Just add new door to the list. And maybe wolf-proof windows. Cashin's attention flicked to the hallway like a blade. May and Jax will hold the floor. No one else gets within 10 feet of this threshold without me knowing. He looked back at Sloane. We can't keep doing this here. You want me to run, she said, and her voice came out steadier than she felt. Hide in some Hale safe house while you take swings at ghosts. I want you alive, he said simply. And I want to stop giving our enemies a map of your living room. Val put a hand on Sloane's arm. Go, she urged, softer now. I'll be okay with May and Jax for a few days. I can crash at Mom's on the other side of town. I'll bring the plants so they don't die of separation anxiety. Sloane's heart thudded hard at the word go. An hour ago she'd have sprinted for it. Now the idea of fleeing because Corin Vale said jump made something stubborn set its heels inside her. No, she said. We move, but not because we're scared. Because we're choosing the field. She turned to Cashin. You said you buy the things you can't afford to lose. You have a place to make a stand. He searched her face, measuring not bravery but readiness. Red Haven, he said. Old shipyard at the tip of the ridge. My pack's stronghold. Faint, rueful smile. It's uglier than the name implies. Uglier is good, Sloane said. Uglier feels honest. He nodded once, decision taking root. We go now. Not without telling me what your plan is, Sloane said. I'm done being cargo. His mouth softened, something like pride threading through the worry. We draw them out. Corin won't stop poking. His alpha won't let him keep missing. Men like Northbank don't tolerate incompetence. He'll push for a public humiliation. Something to rattle my hold. We offer a parley and turn it into a line he can't cross. A trap. A boundary, Cashin corrected. The only kind men like Dorian North understand. We'll choose ground where you're protected and where his numbers don't matter. And if he brings numbers anyway, then they learn what mine look like, Cashin said, and his tone went very quiet. And what my Luna sounds like. Sloane flinched at the word even as something hungry lifted its head inside her. I'm not Luna. You are, Cashin said. Power knows itself when it wakes. You commanded last night. You held this door with your bare hands and the air listened. That's a Luna's voice. Val exhaled, some of her color returning. If she's Luna, does she get a discount at hardware stores? Because this door is a situation. Cashin smiled, small and real. I'll send someone with a new frame in an hour. His gaze returned to Sloane, serious again. Pack a bag. She didn't move yet. Not until she caught Val's face in both hands. You go to Mom's, she said. You answer May, not your texts from unknown numbers. And if anyone smiles too politely at you on the street, you break their knee. Val's laugh came out watery. I love when you go full apocalypse, sister. She hugged Sloane hard, voice muffled against her shoulder. Come back in one piece, preferably with a good story. Sloane packed fast. Jeans, 2 sweaters, running shoes, the contract folder, the plant cuttings that hated everyone but her. She paused at the window and looked down at their street. Ugly, stubborn, beloved. She wasn't choosing between a life and a storm. She realized. She was choosing where to stand when the storm hit. That felt different. That felt like hers. They left with May up front and Jax covering the rear, Cashin at Sloane's side not like an escort but like a gravity she consented to orbit. The city watched without pretending not to. Faces in windows, a corner vendor who made the sign old women made when the church and the forest still shook hands. No one interfered. The SUV's doors shut like a vow. Red Haven rose out of weather and iron, the bones of a shipyard that had failed to die. Corrugated buildings crouched under a high fence topped with curled wire. Beyond them, river and sky. The gate rolled back on silent tracks as the SUV approached. Men and women in dark jackets stepped aside with eyes that took everything in and gave nothing away. Shouldn't have felt safe. It did. Inside, the smell changed: machine oil, salt, cedar, meat from a kitchen somewhere humming. Movement stacked on movement. Sparring in a chalked ring. A woman repairing a drone's rotor. A kid mopping with quiet precision. No ceremony. Work. Cashin led her into a wide building with old gantry cranes asleep overhead. A wall of glass looked out on the water. Along the opposite wall, maps and monitors glowed. In the middle, a table that looked like it had heard every fight already and survived. This is where we make decisions, he said. Sloane walked to the glass and set her hands on the cold sill. The river threw light at her without apology. Then decide this: we don't wait for them to pick time and place. We pick both. Jax's mouth twitched. Already in motion. He lifted a tablet to show a message drafted in simple, brutal etiquette. Hail to North. Parley at dusk. Red Haven outer pier. You bring 2. I bring 2. Neutral ground in sight of witnesses. Decline and we conclude talks are done. He'll come, May said, folded into a chair like a coiled spring. North can't resist an audience. Corn Vale will insist, Jax added. He wants stage lights. Sloane's stomach tightened. Let him have them. We won't be the ones blinking. Cashin's gaze found her again, the way it always did when he wanted to make sure they were still standing on the same ground. You'll be behind the line, he said, between me and the wall. If anything feels wrong, you'll know, she said, surprised by the certainty. And I won't freeze. His mouth softened into that almost smile he didn't give anyone else. I know. They spent the hours until dusk training that wasn't drills. Walking the pier, choosing sightlines, rehearsing calm. Cashin showed her where to stand so the crosswind wouldn't steal her voice, where the boards were loose, which pilings groaned when the tide moved. He didn't say it, but she knew. He was mapping fear in advance so it would have fewer places to hide. May passed Sloane a slim earpiece. Redundant with the bond, she said. But redundancy is what keeps people breathing. She met Sloane's eyes, steady and frank. If anyone touches you, I break them. That's not an alpha order. That's a promise I made myself. Thank you, Sloane said, and meant it all the way down. Dusk came on like a switch. The river went from steel to slate to ink, and the wind tasted of distant rain. Yellow bulbs strung along the pier flickered to life. Shadows lengthened across the yard as the pack drifted to the edges of sight. Not close enough to crowd, not far enough to fail. Northbank arrived late enough to insult and early enough to gloat. 3 men in black stepped through the gate with the kind of swagger that needed witnesses. Corin Vale walked in the middle, hands in pockets, mouth already smiling the way a knife smiles. To his right, a thick-necked enforcer with a boxer's nose. To his left, a man too forgettable to be accidental. Behind them came Dorian North. He wore no jacket despite the cold. Sleeves rolled to show forearms latticed with pale scars like a roadmap put back together wrong. He wasn't bigger than Cashin, but he moved like someone who'd stopped asking permission to take up space a long time ago. His eyes were pale, almost colorless, and empty in a way that made Sloane's skin crawl. Alpha Hail, North drawled. Drifting to a stop at the chalked line May had painted 10 feet from the pier's edge. You do pick the most charming venues. A ship graveyard. Appropriate. Waste turned useful, Cashin said. I can recommend it. North's smile thinned. You requested parley. We came. No, Cashin said. I requested an answer. You came to make a scene. Corin stepped half a pace forward. Careful, Hale. Scenes are my specialty. His gaze slid past Cashin and found Sloane like a dog scenting meat. Miss Avery, he said. Silk wrapped around rot. You look awake. Sloane kept her face flat, the way Cashin had told her. You look like a man who tests fences just to hear them rattle. A murmur rippled along the dock. Hail wolves who didn't bother hiding their satisfaction. Corin's smile sharpened. North didn't react. His eyes were on Cashin, hunting angles. Terms, North said. We stop sniffing around your pet project. You stop building on what isn't yours. Cashin's jaw didn't change. Red Haven is mine. Cities have edges, North said. Yours is the ridge. You've forgotten how to share. Sharing isn't when you take my hand and then my wrist, Cashin said. It's when you don't ask me to bleed so you can drink. Corin's laugh rasped. Poetry from a builder. How novel. Sloane felt the wind shift, cool fingers riffling her hair. The bond hummed, awareness pointing like a weather vane. She lifted her eyes just as movement flickered in her periphery. 3 more of North's men slipping along the far fence, using stacked pallets as cover. Right side, she said under her breath. Not for the earpiece but along the thread pulled tight between her and Cashin. 3. He brought more. I see them. Cashin's thought pressed back, calm even now. Hold. North spread his hands, magnanimous as a thief in a church. We're reasonable men, Hale. We prefer commerce to carnage. Give us the river contracts. Keep your little hill and the nice views. Cashin's laugh was the softest thing Sloane had heard all day, and somehow the most dangerous. You think this is about zoning? North's eyes chilled. Everything is about power. You're hoarding. You smell it on him, don't you? Corin cut in, eyes bright with a meanness that admired itself. On her, the bond. It makes him think he can say no to the tide. North finally looked at Sloane. There was no lust there, no admiration. Only the cold arithmetic of a man tallying assets. She's a rumor with shoulders, he said. Let's see if she's anything more. He moved before the sentence finished, faster than anyone that size had a right to. One moment he was behind his line. The next he was a blur homing on a single target. Sloane. Corin smiled like a director pleased his lead had hit his mark. Cashin stepped into North's path and the world narrowed to the clang of 2 wills hitting at speed. They collided with a sound that was part growl, part thunder. The pier shuddered under the force. Cashin's hands were on North's shoulders, North's on Cashin's throat. Then they were grappling, turning, testing each other for weaknesses they'd read in reports but never felt in bone. Jax was already moving on the right flank. May disappeared. Two of North's shadows disappeared with her and didn't come back as quickly as they'd hoped. The boxer-nosed enforcer took one step forward like a man deciding whether to join a bar fight. Sloane lifted a palm and snapped. Just a flick, a flex, and a stack of rope coils toppled between him and the line. Not a weapon but an obstacle he had to notice. He hesitated. Small choices make big ones late. Corin watched it all with a priest's attention and a hyena's delight. "Look at that," he murmured. "She dances." Sloane's heart hammered. She knew what Cashin had told her. Stay back, stay behind the line. But the line had moved. The fight was here, and the part of her that had hated waiting her whole life rose up and bared teeth. North shoved Cashin hard, sending him skidding 3 feet on the slick boards. He followed with a hook that would have broken a lesser man's jaw. Cashin took it on the forearm and returned a blow that made North grunt and smile like he remembered how to enjoy pain. "Still think this is commerce?" Cashin asked through his teeth. "It's always commerce," North said, and then his eyes flicked over Cashin's shoulder. Not to Sloane but past her, to the shadow behind a piling where a 4th North Bank wolf had been waiting like a bad surprise. Sloane didn't think. She moved. Later she would try to account for the choices in that single second. The way her breath dropped to her belly like Cashin had taught her. The way curiosity found a shape for the force in her hands. The way her feet knew which boards would hold and which would groan. But in the moment there was only this. She crossed the pier in 3 strides and used her body like a lever, not a hammer. Her palm cut the air just inches from the hidden man's chest and the air obeyed her. He didn't fly. He stopped, like a film frame snagged on a projector tooth. The shock in his eyes was comic. He stumbled backward into view, hands out, suddenly prey. Corin's polite mask cracked. "There she is," he breathed, delighted. "Hale's miracle." North snarled. A thin, ugly sound, and went for Cashin's throat with claws showing under his nails. Cashin ducked, slammed North into the piling hard enough to make the lights stutter. Wooden echoes rolled downriver like a warning bell. Hale wolves edged in at the perimeter. North Bank's extra shadows realized why May had vanished. "Choice, Sloane." Cashin's thought pressed into hers through the roar. Not an order. An invitation made of iron. Make it loud. She understood suddenly and entirely. Not just what he meant, what she was. Aluna wasn't an ornament or a rumor or a prize. She was an axis. The place a pack turned when the ground shifted. The voice the wild recognized. Sloane lifted her chin. The wind caught her hair and threw it backward like a flag. "North Bank," she said, and her voice carried down the pier and out over the water like it had someone else's lungs behind it. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. "You are guests on my port." Corin laughed once, disbelieving. North didn't. He heard what she'd named and some old animal in him flinched before his face could refuse. "You'll leave," Sloane continued, and each word fell. "You come for me again, and you won't find your way home." Power rippled under the planks, the river answering, the cables humming like a struck string. Even the lights seemed to lean. The boxer-nosed enforcer stumbled and crossed himself without meaning to, as if his grandmother's church had woken up inside his hands. Corin's smile returned, tight and bright with hate. "Pretty noise," he said, but his voice wasn't steady. North bared his teeth. "You think claiming a word gives you teeth? You think a bed makes you Luna?" Sloane stepped forward, one more pace into the space where fear usually lived. "No," she said. "I think I do." North moved in that wrong fast way again, not at Cashin this time but at her, because some men only learn by breaking the thing that frightens them. The choice wrote itself across the wharf like a shadow. Cashin was there first. He hit North at an angle that turned momentum into a weapon, drove him to the boards, and pinned him with a forearm across the throat. The world narrowed to two pairs of eyes and the thread between them. Alpha to alpha, bone to bone, a ledger with old red lines and new ink. "Listen," Cashin said softly. Like a man speaking to a dog he'd decided not to shoot yet. "Hear her." North's lip curled. "I hear nothing." "Then you'll hear this." Cashin's teeth lengthened. He lowered his head and bit North's shoulder. Not a killing bite, not even a maim. A mark. A humiliation in the language only their kind spoke. North howled, shock and outrage and a sliver of real fear turning his voice thin. Corin lunged. Jax met him halfway with an efficiency that suggested long practice. May appeared out of absence and touched the forgettable man behind Corin once, precisely. He folded like laundry. The boxer took one step, saw Sloane's eyes, and decided not to take the second. The peer listened. Sloane felt the moment like a pressure drop before a storm breaks. Choice again, the kind that changes who gets to draw breath tomorrow. She knelt, not touching Cashin, not touching North. She set her hand, palm down, on the planks that had held ship after ship and storm after storm. She let the heat and thrum in her blood pour through that touch into the old wood. The pier didn't crack. It sang. A note deep enough to live in bone. The sound traveled down into the pilings and out into the water and back up into the ribs of everyone standing on it. "Go," she said. And the note carried the word to places words can't usually go. "Take your lieutenant. Count your men. Count your losses. Count your days." For the first time, Dorian North looked unsure of where his feet were. He shoved at Cashin. Cashin let him up. Pride demanded a retort. Survival demanded hands that worked. North chose hands. He backed to his line, shoulder bleeding through his rolled sleeve. He looked at Sloane long and cleanly, not pretending not to hate her and not pretending not to understand what had changed. "This isn't over," he said, because men like him were born with that sentence welded to the back of their teeth. Sloane's mouth curled, not friendly. "It is for tonight." North jerked his chin at Corin. "Move." Corin stared at Sloane like he was memorizing where to put the knife next time. Then he smiled and the expression broke across his face like glass. "We'll see which one of you survives loving the other." May's hand twitched. Jax's didn't move at all, and still the promise in him was visible. North turned, and the three men walked off the pier the way men do when they need everyone to believe retreat is strategy. No one cheered. The sound that rose among the hail wolves was lower, older. Approval with teeth. Relief that didn't dare get noisy. A woman Sloane didn't know crossed herself and wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. The bulbs along the dock steadied, one by one. Cashin stood very still, his chest rising and falling like he remembered he had lungs. The glow had left his eyes. The wolf hadn't left the room. Sloane turned to him. He reached for her and then stopped himself, remembering her line before she had to remind him. "Don't be noble," she said, stepping into the space that belonged to both of them. She set her palm over his heart, feeling the thud under skin and shirt and muscle that had saved her more than once in the last 2 days. "You said I could choose." His mouth clicked into something that wasn't quite a smile because it was too full of other things. "You don't owe me an answer tonight." "I'm not paying a debt," she said. "I'm telling the truth." He swallowed, a visible thing. "Tell it." She took his face in both hands, and the pier and the river and the watchers and the lights all slid away like they finally understood the story wasn't about them. "I choose us," she said. "Not because a bond dragged me, not because you bought my street a new door. Because you made room for my fear and didn't try to drive it out with your own. Because when I spoke, you listened. Because when you could have killed, you marked. Because the word Luna didn't scare me when it came out of my mouth." Something broke in his expression that wasn't weakness. It was relief finding a place to sleep. "May I?" he started, and she didn't let him finish because she already knew the question and the answer. She rose onto her toes and kissed him in the middle of the hail pack's stronghold with the river talking in its sleep and the city pretending not to listen. This time it wasn't gravity. It was ignition, not wildfire-controlled burn. Heat that knew its work. Hands that marked shoulder and jaw and nape like prayers that didn't require a church. The pack didn't look away out of prudery. They looked steady to give the moment a wall to lean on. Old ways aren't embarrassed. They're honest. When she pulled back, she kept her palms against his cheeks because letting go felt like an event the room wasn't ready for. "What happens now?" she asked, neither afraid nor naive, just tired and hungry for a future that wasn't constantly running. "Now," he said, voice gone low and raw. "We bind what we've chosen under a roof and a sky. We eat, we sleep, we watch the doors. Tomorrow we take their toys away." It sounded like a plan she could live inside. Jax cleared his throat with a discretion that would have made a better world out of a worse war. "We'll sweep the perimeter again," he said. "I want eyes on the south fence until dawn." May nodded to Sloane, the ghost of a grin pulling at her mouth. "Nice voice," she said. "The compliment a warrior offers another after a good fight." Sloane huffed a soft laugh that had nowhere in the last week to live until now. "Thanks. Yours is the one people listen to right before they nap unexpectedly." May's grin sharpened. "It has its uses." Inside the main building, someone had laid out food that smelled like warmth. Sloane ate with fingers and a spoon, not caring which, hunger carving out anxiety's seat and taking it for itself. Val texted a photo of a ridiculous plant laden with blankets and 3 exclamation points. Sloane texted back a photo of a half-eaten bowl and a thumbs up. Val replied with a heart and, because she was Val, "Don't get mated without me there to throw glitter." Sloane snorted and tucked the phone away. Later, much later, when the building had found a quieter hum and the river had settled into its own, Cashin walked her down a corridor that smelled like cedar shavings and soap. He opened a door on a room that looked out over the water. The bed was a clean geometry of white and wood. A chair sat by the window like it had been waiting for someone to sit and watch the tide. He didn't step in. "You can lock it from the inside," he said. "And from the outside if you want me to hold the hall." She turned the deadbolt, unlocked it again. "Stay," she said, soft like a request that would break if he breathed on it wrong. His breath caught, audible, human. "Sloane, not for that," she said, and watched understanding and something warmer pass through him. "For sleep. For the sound of someone breathing who isn't going to break the door." He nodded once, a tiny movement with the weight of a vow, and stepped in. He sat in the chair by the window. She lay down on top of the covers, boots off, jacket tugged over her like a child's logic for comfort. He turned the lamp down until the room was mostly river. "You were afraid," she said into the dim, because confession felt easier when you couldn't see what it did to a face. "Not of North, of me, of what I'd choose." "Yes," he said, honest as bone. "I would have honored your no. I would have protected you anyway. It would have killed me more slowly, that's all." She closed her eyes, her body finally remembering how to give way to rest. "Don't be noble," she reminded, "because repetition turns the right words into anchors." "Then I won't," he murmured. "I'll be yours." Sleep took her fast and clean. When she woke once just before dawn, the river was a darker band and Cashin's head was tipped back against the chair, mouth slightly open like a man who'd fought his sleep and lost. She watched him for a long minute, the way one watches a house after the fire is out, checking for sparks. There were none, only breath. She closed her eyes again and dreamed of doors that opened to places she chose, and wolves that waited not outside but at the foot of the bed like faithful, not frightening. Outside Red Haven's fence, North sat in a car that didn't belong to him, chewing the inside of his cheek until it bled. Corin Vale watched the river and smiled without teeth. Dawn would come and with it errands, plans, the thin metal sounds of men building a new trap out of old tools. Inside, in the room with a view and a chair meant for waiting, Sloane rolled onto her side and found that her fear had made space for something else. Choice had teeth too. Tomorrow she would use them. Chapter 9. Red Haven woke with the tide. By the time the sun cracked the horizon, the shipyard was alive. Boots on metal stairs, sparring thuds from the chalk ring, the scent of coffee cutting through the river's brine. Sloane stepped out of her borrowed room and felt it in her bones. This place wasn't a refuge. It was a fortress that wore its work like armor. Cashin was already awake, of course. He stood on the pier in a dark shirt rolled at the sleeves, talking low with Jax while May tested the tension on a bowstring like she was preparing to put an arrow through the dawn. His head turned the moment Sloane appeared, as if the bond tugged him before sound or sight did. Their gazes held for a beat too long. Then Jax cleared his throat, and Cashin looked away, business sliding back over his features like a mask he wore for the world. May approached Sloane with a mug of something that steamed and smelled bitter. "Drink. You look like your blood forgot to boil." Sloane accepted it, grimacing at the first sip but grateful anyway. "I didn't sleep much." "You won't until the bond settles," May said simply. "Your wolf's waking. She doesn't know yet if night is for rest or for hunting." Sloane bristled. "I don't have a wolf." May's expression didn't change. "You will." Before Sloane could argue, Cashin strode back, authority in every line of his body. "North won't take last night as loss. He'll frame it as a stalemate," spread whispers that were weaker than we looked. His gaze swept the group, then settled on Sloane. "He'll come again soon, and next time he won't settle for parley." The weight of his attention pressed against her. Sloane lifted her chin. "Then teach me faster." Something flickered in his eyes. Not surprise, not quite pride, but recognition. "We don't have the luxury of months. We'll cut it to days." Training became survival. Cashin pushed harder than before. Drills until her arms shook, focus exercises until her head throbbed. He made her strike, block, fall, rise, repeat, until her body learned patterns even when her mind screamed for rest. May sparred with her too, faster, sharper. No mercy in the way she swept Sloane's feet or aimed a strike inches from her jaw. "Better to bleed now than break later," May said when Sloane staggered. But the bond complicated everything. Every time Cashin touched her, correcting her stance, guiding her breath, the heat surged, coiling low in her belly. Every time she pushed against him, palm to chest, she felt the drumbeat of his heart, steady and furious, and her own matched it without permission. By the second afternoon, Sloane collapsed on the pier, sweat streaking her face, her lungs scraping raw. "You're trying to kill me." Cashin crouched, offering a bottle of water. "I'm trying to keep you alive." She glared, gulped the water, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "You keep saying that like it's the same thing." He leaned closer, voice low enough that only she could hear. "You think I want you to fight? You think I want your hands bloody? No. I want you safe in a world that doesn't allow safety. That's the only reason I push." The honesty in his voice cracked something inside her, a fissure she couldn't ignore. She looked away before the heat in her chest became something else entirely. That night, the first real attack came. The alarm blared just after midnight, a shrill cry cutting through the compound. Sloane jerked awake, heart hammering, the bond already thrumming like a live wire. She stumbled into Boots and out into the yard, the air filled with shouting. Wolves poured toward the fence, shadows moving too fast to be human on the other side. Cashin appeared at her side, half-shifted already. Eyes blazing, teeth sharp, claws cutting through the tips of his fingers. "Stay behind me." "No," she said, and her voice shocked her with its steadiness. "I'm not hiding." His head snapped toward her, fury sparking. "Sloane, I can help." She cut in, pulse pounding. "You said control comes from edges. Let me prove I have them." For a moment, war raged in his eyes. Alpha command against the bond's plea. Then he nodded once, sharp. "Stay in my sight. You fall, you call my name." They moved together. The fence rattled under claws and fists. A shadow vaulted it, and Sloane raised her hand. The air answered, a sharp blast that sent the intruder sprawling back onto the ground outside. Another leapt for the top, teeth bared. Cashin's claws tore him down midair. May's arrow whistled, pinning a third to the earth. Chaos churned, loud and violent, but beneath it Sloane felt something terrifying. Clarity. Her senses sharpened, her body stronger, faster. For the first time, she wasn't prey. She was part of the fight. By the time the rivals retreated, dragging their wounded, Red Haven stood firm. Blood stained the dirt, but it wasn't Hale blood. Sloane's chest heaved as she leaned against the fence, sweat mingling with rain. Her hands trembled from power, not fear. She turned to Cashin, who was still half wolf, golden eyes locked on her. "You fought," he said, awe and something deeper threading his voice. "I didn't freeze," she whispered back. He stepped closer, claws retracting, his wolf retreating enough to let the man speak. "You were fire." Her pulse stumbled, heat curling low. "So were you." The bond surged, fierce and undeniable. His hand lifted, brushing damp hair from her cheek, fingers lingering like he couldn't help it. "You scare me," he confessed, voice rough. Her breath caught. "Why?" "Because I've never wanted anyone this much," Cashin said. "And I don't know if wanting will be enough to keep you." The world around them still echoed with the aftermath of battle. But for that heartbeat, Sloane felt only this. The alphasphere, the Luna's fire, and the future barreling toward them both like a storm they could no longer outrun. Chapter 10. Red Haven never pretended to be pretty, but in the days that followed the first attack it became something else entirely. Braced, watchful, tuned like an instrument before a hard song. The cranes wore new cables. The fence bristled with quiet improvements that didn't look like much until you tried to climb them. The chalk ring on the yard's concrete stayed scuffed because there was always someone moving inside it. Sloane learned the sound of a bolt driven home and the way the river changed pitch when stormwater gates upriver cracked open. She learned the names of the night shift, people who cut their hair short because it didn't get in the way of a fight and people who didn't, because the world had already taken enough from them. She also learned the shape of the ache that came when Cashin wasn't in the room. It wasn't panic anymore. It was awareness, vivid as a bruise. Where his feet were, where his attention had gone, the way fatigue pulled one shoulder slightly lower when he thought no one could see. At night, when exhaustion threaded through her muscles like heavy thread, she fell asleep to the rhythm of his breathing in the chair by the window and woke to the smell of cedar on the cuff of her jacket. She kept telling herself it was too much, too fast. The bond didn't care about calendars. The world outside their fence certainly didn't. The email from Ms. Donnelly arrived on the third morning. The contract revised, predatory clauses neutered under Val's notes. "Sign when you're ready." The message ended, a mercy in corporate monosyllables. Sloane stared at the cursor above her name and signed. Normal life didn't have to die because the wild had wandered in. It just had to make room, the way you slide a chair over for someone who loves you and also carries a knife. "Good," Cashin said when she told him. He didn't say "I'm proud of you," but something in him stood taller as if he'd been and it had changed his posture. "He'll come again," May said that same afternoon, as if she could smell North's patience souring. "Soon, with more teeth." He came that night. It began wrong. Not with an alarm, but with quiet. Sloane was in the map room with a pencil tucked behind her ear and a knot of hair refusing to obey the elastic, reviewing floodplain overlays for the South District because her new job would still care about stormwater whether she was Luna or not. The building breathed around her. Out by the docks, someone laughed low at a joke. In the far warehouse, a radio murmured old soul vinyl. She didn't notice when the radio clicked off. She didn't hear the laughter stop. She noticed when the river fell silent, when the lap of water against the pilings halved, then halved again, like someone had put a large hand over the mouth of a singer. She lifted her head. The pencil fell and rolled. The bond thinned, not weaker, but stretched as if distance had been added without space. Cashin wasn't in the yard anymore. He was on the wall. He had turned his face toward something she couldn't see. Sloane. Jax filled the doorway, not winded, not dramatic. We need you at the pier. What is it? He didn't waste her time with guesses. Bring your voice. She ran. Red Haven's yard had that tense crowd stillness. Bodies gathered and the air held taut between them. At the fence, the night was full of eyes. They reflected light like coins on the bottom of a river. Shapes moved beyond the wire, big and lean, too smooth for ordinary men and too silent for mercy. Dorian North had not sent men this time. He had brought wolves. A metal groan rose from the south gate. The new gate, the one they'd reinforced. It wasn't a breach. It was a test of soundness, like a hand pressing a bruise to see how the body reacts. Sloane slid in beside Cashin on the pier. His shirt sleeves were rolled, and his forearms were marked with old scars that could have been stories if the night had been quieter. He looked like a man who'd had enough of proving lessons to the same student. They cut the power 2 blocks out, he said without looking at her. We're running on batteries and piss. North's got a man on the substation. Not for long. Do you want me to call it? She asked. He turned then, and the gold had already come into his eyes. I want you to be ready to make it true. The south gate shuddered again. Not a battering ram. Something more like a pry bar the size of a pine. May ghosted up on Sloane's left, bow in hand, and a second string looped around her wrist like a promise she wore on purpose. He'll try 3 points at once, May said softly, not to frighten, to prep. Left fence, south gate, waterline. Waterline, Sloane repeated. He thinks we still forget to look under, Jack said, appearing on Sloane's other side and making it a line of 4. He's not wrong. Humans forget that part. Sloane crouched and laid a palm against the boards. The river skin was different here, cool and wide, yes, but also tense, like a body braced for impact. She could feel the vibration of small engines moving very slowly. Boats with their lights killed, idling just beyond the pilings. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. He brought them in quiet, she said. Then we make loud, Cashin murmured. The gate screamed. The fence toward the left bowed inward like a lung sucking in air. And beneath them, water sloshed twice against the pilings. Once small, once deeper, as if something had nudged it from below. Cashin didn't bark orders. He didn't need to. The Hale wolves moved to their posts like a body remembering the dance it had been rehearsing since dawn. Val would have laughed at Sloane for thinking in choreography metaphors. Sloane thought them anyway because it calmed her to imagine that even chaos had rules. The first wolf cleared the fence like a shadow with ambition. May's arrow took him in the meat of the shoulder and spun him. He landed snarling and ran into Jax, who put him down with neat efficiency and tied his hands behind him with plastic cuffs. A choice that said we don't waste enemies if we can make use of their fear. Along the south gate, 2 more came up and caught on the new struts. They hung there, writhing, making ugly laughter to disguise the fact that they were stuck. Out on the water, something scritched against a piling. The hair on Sloane's arms lifted. She did not run. Now? She asked, because she needed a word to push off. Cashin's mouth barely moved. Now. Sloane stepped to the edge of the pier. The lights were thin. The river ate what they offered and sent back a warped mirror. She breathed down low and let the night fill her ears until the thuds and scrapes and ugly laughter became texture instead of distraction. Until it was just her spine, the water, the planks, and the line running through the middle of her like a string pulled tight between 2 stubborn hands. Enough, she said. The word didn't crack like thunder. It went out level, evenly weighted, vowels clean. But the river answered. It slapped the pilings hard twice, and every boat against the pier rocked. On the fence, the left line of attackers stuttered as if someone had tugged their footing. At the gate, something metallic squealed and then snapped. The pry bar dropped on a foot or a face, hard to tell. Someone swore in a language that didn't bother with vowels. Sloane took another breath. You're in my port, she said. You leave standing or you leave carried. Decide. There was a time when saying words like that would have felt like playing dress-up in a world too big for her. The time had passed. The power that lived under the boards hummed up into the bones of her feet, and she felt the company of the wolves behind her like warmth in a room in winter. She did not need to look back to know Cashin had moved closer. Not to shield, to anchor. North's voice came from the dark, measured and cold. You made a pretty speech last time, girl. That's twice. I'm tired of listening. Then stop coming, Sloane said. Homework's not mandatory after a certain grade. A barked laugh came from the left. Hale sighed, amused even now. It died quickly. Claws skittered on metal. Someone hit the fence a third time in a way that would break ribs if a body were in the way and let it. They were going to come through. On me, Cashin said quietly and moved forward. Sloane stayed where she was because that was the geometry that worked. Alpha meets alpha, Luna names the ground. May drifted to high left for sightlines. Jax disappeared and would reappear where the thinnest bridge needed a boot. The south gate sighed inward. Not all the way. Enough. Wolves poured through low and fast for first, then two behind and one who vaulted last and landed wrong and still kept coming because adrenaline had paid his rent for years. Cashin met the first with that terrifying stillness that made all his speed invisible until it wasn't. Hands, teeth, elbows, claws. The sounds of a fight that wasn't street brawl sloppy but clean, planned violence sung at tempo. A shape came over the fence to Sloane's right, smaller, quicker, a runner with too much confidence and not enough plan. He targeted her because men like him don't resist symbols, and she'd become one. She didn't wait for him to close. She lifted a hand and put weight into the air. It wasn't a blast. It was pressure. He hit it midair, confusion crashing across his face as he suddenly had mass he'd never had to compute before. He hit the boards hard and rolled to his feet with a curse, because some men learn only with broken bones. Don't, she said, and the word brushed across his face like a flat palm. His knees buckled. He went down on all fours and stayed there, snarling, but staying because something older than habit had listened. Another came at her low. Sloane sidestepped and let his momentum go where it wanted. He went past, skidded, and kissed a piling with his shoulder. He cursed in surprise because it had been too easy. This was supposed to be hard. She almost pitied him for the first lesson coming under bad lights. Left line, May called, and Sloane pivoted. A gap had opened where it shouldn't have, and three of North's men were trying to pour through it the way water does when a dam is careless. Sloane flattened her palm and pushed the air sideways. It made a sound she had no word for, part wind, part violin string breaking. The men hit each other like carriage cars bumping and tangled in their own bodies. May's arrow pinned a sleeve to a strut, and the man attached to it realized he'd met a woman who collected wrists as a hobby. Where was North? The question answered itself a heartbeat later at the south gate. He came through last, stepping over his own men with a tight smile that asked the room to admire his stamina. He was not shifted, and he did not need to be. His violence wore a man shape comfortably. He didn't look at Sloane. He went for Cashin like they were 2 points on a line they'd both been walking toward since before they were born. They hit with the ugly grace of old enemies. Cashin shoved him hard back toward the gate to keep the fight away from the heart of the yard, and North let himself be shoved because he wanted the optics. Wanted to be able to say later that he'd taken the alpha back to his fence and made him feel it. He raked claws across Cashin's forearm. Cashin caught his wrist and bent it enough that North swore and then smiled, delighted to have pain to chew. It was not a clean fight. It was a ledger with teeth. Sloane could feel Cashin's heart like it was inside her chest. He was winning, but winning costs. Corin Vale slid out of the dark like a rumor you can't kill. He didn't go for Sloane immediately. He circled, eyes bright, mouth already curling around the smirk he used when he decided to make a woman tired before he broke her. You're wearing our colors now, he said, as though he'd been offered a choice and the city had laughed. Hale's pet voice. I'm not a pet, she said. I bite. Show me. He feinted left, then came in low and mean. She caught his shoulder and felt the electric jolt of contact. The parts of him that weren't human leaned toward her like a moth that couldn't help itself. He twisted out quick and swept a leg at her ankle. She hopped back. He smiled because he thought he'd taught her something. He had. She let him think she'd learned it late. They moved. He was slick, all flick and taunt, the kind of fighter who likes making you feel stupid before he makes you bleed. He went for Val's shadow with his words because he couldn't get to the woman herself, and Sloane's temper flared, heat blooming in her throat like she'd swallowed the wrong end of a match. She didn't shove him with power. She did something worse. She caught his face with both hands. Not a strike. A hold. He jerked, but her palms were already humming. "Listen," she said, and put the humming into him. For a fraction of a second, Corin went quiet. Not because she broke him, he was too stubborn for that, but because something older than him had put a hand on his chest and told him to sit. The bond inside Sloane wasn't only her and Cashin. It was Pack. It was the part of the wild that has rules. It looked through her the way thunderclouds look through summer and said, "Not you." His eyes went wide in outrage at the thing he didn't have a word for. He tore free, physically snapping to the side so her hands slid off, and came at her with a snarl that had too much hurt in it. She ducked. He clipped her shoulder, and pain sang down her arm like a struck wire. She let the pain ground her instead of take her breath, focus, edges, and fed it into a push that wasn't a wall this time but a twist. The air splayed his footing out from under him. He went down laughing because men like him laugh when they fall to pretend they've chosen it. He rolled and popped to his feet in a wrestler's square. "There you are," he said through his teeth, delighted. "I was afraid you were all sermon." Screaming metal tore at the south gate. Jax's shout snapped across the yard. "Right, now." Sloane's head turned with everyone else's and she caught the blur. Two of North's wolves breaking hard for the control box on the generator stack. Because losing light breaks morale faster than broken bones. May's bow sang and one went down with an arrow through the meat of his thigh. The other hit the box with his shoulder. It didn't give. 2 years ago it would have. Cashin had learned how to buy the right things. North shoved Cashin into the gate hard enough that the bars rattled a cord. It should have been humiliation. Cashin used the bounce, came back off the metal and hit North in the ribs so cleanly that Sloane felt the breath go out of the other man across the pier. North staggered and smiled. A man who hated to respect the hands hurting him. "You might be worth the trouble," he said. "Shame your city isn't." Sloane didn't answer him. She didn't need to. She turned to the water. The boats had crept closer in the tumult. Their engines ghost quiet, bows nosing like rats. Men crouched in them with poles and hooks, not guns, and that was a worse sign. Guns made noise and blamed bullets. Hooks dripped with intent. Sloane crouched again, palms on the wood. The river was under her hands now and not in the way currents make poets. It was a living thing with work to do, and it hadn't been asked for its consent when the boats slid in like thieves. She didn't command it. She asked. Not with words, with respect. "Help us hold," she thought, and let the thought run out of her fingers like heat. The water answered. It thickened around the pilings, catching the boats in silken fists and sliding them sideways with a perversity that looked like luck if you didn't know to look. One boat bumped another and a hook went into a friend's shoulder. A curse tore the night. That would be a story at somebody's table later, but not at Red Haven's. Corin saw the boats jerk and his sneer faltered. He recovered by lunging for Sloane in a straight line that told on his panic. She bailed left, let his fingers rake air where her throat had been. He came again. She counted his tells, left foot heel first, right shoulder up when his mouth smiled, and slipped inside the rhythm he'd trained into himself because he liked the way it made him feel tall. He tried to grab her wrist. She twisted and broke his grip the way Cashin had taught her. Not with strength, with angle. She used his forearm to lever him into a post. He hit and went low, instinct working through its script. She could have kneed his face. She didn't. She put her hand on the back of his neck and pressed him down. A pressure that wasn't bruising but humiliating in a language older than words. "Yield," she said very quietly, so only he could hear the mercy in it. He heaved under her hand and she let him up because sometimes mercy is for you, not them. He would come again. He came again. She was ready. Around them, the yard was in that phase of a fight where the decision had been made but the bodies didn't know it yet. Hail wolves pushed the line outward 2 feet at a time. North's men gave ground because the math had returned from its cigarette break and pointed to numbers they didn't like. The south gate was holding. The left fence had stopped bowing. On the water, one of the engines coughed and died the way machines do when they decide they like one owner better than another. North saw it. He hated it. He wrenched free of Cashin's hold with a twist that cost him skin and pride and backed 3 steps into the churn of his own retreat. "We're not done," he said, and even he sounded tired of the sentence. "You keep saying that," Cashin answered, not goading, just honest. And then he did the single most dangerous thing a man like him could do, nothing. He didn't chase. He didn't snarl. He stood there with his chest rising, his forearms bleeding, and looked at North like the tide looks at the shore. "I'll be back when I feel like it, not when you demand it." Corin tried to steal one last moment. A lunge that would have chalked a petty win into his private tally. Sloane saw him shift his weight and moved early, inside his thought. She met him halfway and took his wrists in her hands. They were strong, slick with sweat. She tightened her grip until his fingers twitched. She didn't crush. She held. "Say my name," she said, because he liked to use it like a tool. He grinned, his mouth finding the shape of Sloane like he wanted to spit it on the ground. She shook her head once. "Not like that." Something passed between them then that wasn't victory or humiliation. It was recognition, the ugly kind. He had thought she was a word he could define. He had been wrong, and the world is mean to men when it tells them this out loud. He yanked backward with his whole body. She let him go, so he stumbled. He recovered, sneered because it would be reported later if he didn't, and ran. Jax tracked him to the fence and did not pursue, because sometimes you let a man go to carry a story back to his friends about how scary it is to meet the woman he jokes about when he thinks she can't hear. And then it was over. Not with a cheer. With breath. With the low murmur people make when they realize they are still going to work in the morning and they will have bruises to explain and children to kiss on the top of their heads. Sloane stood on the pier and let her hands stop humming. The aftershake came, small, stubborn tremors in the muscles that had done more than they were used to doing. She didn't fight them. She lifted her hands and looked at them as if she'd be able to see the wild under the skin like a new tattoo. All she saw were her hands. Human. Hers. Cashin came to her, blood on his sleeve drying to the color of rust. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to ask if she was hurt. He would have already known. He searched her face as if there was a new map there and he wanted to see where the rivers ran now. "You held," he said. "We held," she corrected. His mouth softened. "We held." For a second, the world around them receded. The cranes drew their long dark arms in. The generator hummed like a cat that had a good night. May walked past and bumped Sloane's shoulder with a knuckle, the warrior's version of a hug. Jax checked his count against another man's and nodded like a man who enjoyed when math behaved. Sloane swayed toward Cashin, then away, the way bodies do when they want to rest but the day hasn't given permission yet. He saw it. He slid his hand into hers. Not a fist. An interlacing. She didn't realize until that moment how much energy she'd spent holding herself together at the knuckles. The heat of his palm went through her like a warm room in winter. "You brought the river to our side," he said. Wonder and amusement blended into something like gratitude. "How did you?" "I asked," she said, and felt foolish and not at all. "I think it was tired of being made a road." He laughed, breathless and quiet. "You're going to ruin all my old metaphors. You need new ones." They stood like that for a time that wasn't long enough and was exactly right. When they let go, it wasn't because anything between their fingers had cooled. It was because work wanted doing and the bond had never tried to replace work, only to anchor it. By dawn, the yard wore a different story. cuffs clicked around wrists that had come to harm and instead would spend a morning sore and annoyed and thinking about their next job change. Blood hosed off concrete turns pink in good light. Someone in the kitchen put bacon in a pan, and the smell put breath back in people who thought they were too tired to want anything. Val's text arrived with a photo of a new bolt on Sloane's apartment door that gleamed like a fresh tooth. Beneath it, "Mom says bring your man to dinner when this stops being a terror movie." Sloane typed back, "Define stop." Cashin found her later by the map table, pencil behind her ear again out of habit. A smear of grease on her wrist because she'd helped May put a new tensioner on the south winch and liked the way a tool felt in her hand. He walked in like a man who knew he was welcome and also knew how to knock without his hand. "You have a meeting with the mayor at 10, she said, because she couldn't pretend his other life didn't exist. "He'll want to talk about last night as if it was a protest he can appease with a committee." "He'll be disappointed," Cashin said. "Committees don't stop men who like hooks." "He'll ask you if Red Haven is escalating." "I'll tell him the river is done being polite." She smiled despite everything. "He won't like that." "I don't work for his likes," he said, and then he let the mask fall and the man stand in the room. "I need you to see something before I go." He led her down a corridor she hadn't walked yet into a room that smelled like cedar and iron and rain. It was small, with windows that looked west and shelves that held almost nothing. 3 books, a coil of rope, a feather in a jar that looked like it had been rescued from a fire. In the center, a table made from a slice of a tree older than both of them. On the table, a piece of leather, cut neat and square. He picked it up and turned it in his hands, like he was checking for splinters that didn't exist. "My father made this for my mother," he said, voice low and not public. "She wasn't Pac. She never shifted. She never wanted to. She had a voice that could make men ashamed of their own cruelty without saying their names. He wore this when he needed to remember that power and gentleness can live in the same room without one killing the other." He held it out. Up close, Sloane could see the mark burned into the leather. A simple shape, 3 lines crossing at a center point. River, ridge, road. The hail crest. And a second mark bisecting it, a smaller, cleaner line. A choice. "I won't mark you unless you ask me to," he said. And it almost shook out of him. The restraint, the promise, the ache. "But this you can wear and take off and throw in the drawer and forget and put back on again, and still it means what we say it does." "What does it say?" she asked. "That we are a we," he said. "That when you speak, my people hear their Luna and not their Alpha's girlfriend. That when I go to the mayor, he knows I'm not coming alone even if you're nowhere near his stupid table. That when North tries again, and he understands that the axis we turn on is not for sale." She took it. It was warm from his hands. It weighed almost nothing. Felt like the exact opposite. "You don't have to," he started. And she shook her head. A small, decisive movement. "I'm not a pet," she said. And he almost smiled at the old joke, the old wound. "I'm not a rumor. I'm not your alibi or your hostage or your prop. I am Sloane Avery. And I am Luna because I keep choosing to be." She slid the leather band around her wrist and tied it herself. A knot simple and stubborn. When she lifted her hand, the crest lay against the inside of her pulse. He breathed out. The sound was enough to make a morning. "I'll come back after the mayor," he said, hand hovering as if he wanted to touch the band and wouldn't without permission. "Then we plan. Then we go ruin their next idea." "Bring coffee," she said, "because rituals make rooms safe. The good kind, with the little lids that click." "Yes, Luna," he said, without a shred of mockery, and left smiling like a man who knew that wars are won in 100 small rooms long before they ever break a gate. She stood alone for a minute after the door shut and listened. The river regaining its voice, the yard finding its humor, her own heart deciding it wasn't done inventing new ways to beat. She touched the leather at her wrist and didn't feel caged. She felt steadied. That was different. That was everything. Outside Red Haven, North drove through a city that refused to become his and practiced other sentences for the next time he tried. Corin Vale sat in the passenger seat and stared at his hands like he wanted to peel them off and borrow new ones. Neither of them noticed the way the morning light made the river look like a spine. They'd learn. Or they wouldn't. The world wasn't patient, but it was fair in the way a tide is fair. Sloane went back to the map, to the place where rivers and roads pretend not to argue and then go out and do it anyway. She drew a line where floodwater wanted to bully a neighborhood she'd once walked through with a cardboard box of flyers and no idea the world had teeth. She set down the pencil and picked up her phone and called Ms. Donnelly because cities should be saved in daylight too. She left a message about culverts and retention basins and the way budgets could be bullied into paying for what mattered first instead of what made donors clap. When she hung up, she smiled because she'd said her piece and it had sounded like a woman who could speak to wolves and to mayors and to her cousin about plant pots all in the same hour. The leather warmed against her pulse. She pressed it once, as if to say hello. It wasn't an answer she felt. It was a presence. That was enough. Afternoon would bring plans. Night would bring teeth. Tomorrow would bring something worse and something better. What came next would be theirs. Chapter 12. The flare hissed as it burned, painting the sky with a dangerous, celebratory red. It wasn't a signal. It was a taunt. Red Haven answered not with sirens but with motion. Doors opened. Boots hit stairs. The cranes watched like old gods leaning closer to see what their descendants would do. Cashin's hand closed around Sloane's, heat and purpose and the quiet force that always steadied her. They ran. The bond between them pulled taut, a live wire threading through smoke and shadow. The yard bloomed with shapes. Hale wolves taking positions, May sliding to the catwalk above the south gate, Jax vaulting up a ladder 2 rungs at a time. The first fire landed where North meant it to, on the heap of old rope and tarp by the fence, where it would throw a lot of smoke and scare people who didn't know the difference between a symbolic blaze and a fatal one. Sloane smelled the accelerant before the flames took, sharp and chemical. Smelled also the river's damp breath pushing back, reluctant to yield space. She knew, with the same certainty that told her which boards on the pier complained and which ones only sighed, that the blaze itself wasn't their weapon. The smoke was. It would hide numbers. It would make the yard feel smaller. It would make mistakes. North's learned patience, Cashin said, eyes gone gold. He wants our walls to do his work. Then we won't be walls, Sloane said, and felt the truth of it light up inside her body like a wick. The south gate thudded. Not a pry bar this time. A truck backed against the metal with deliberate cruelty, engine grumbling, bumpers biting. On the far left, 3 men shimmied up where the fence met the warehouse corner, bodies slick with something meant to defeat hands and eyes. Beyond the pier, engines purred too low for human ears, boats idling in the notch of shadow under the pilings with poles ready to drag down anyone who fell. And out of the smoke came Corin, smiling the way knives do when they're fond of their purpose. He wore no mask, no bravado not already baked into the angle of his head, the lazy swing of his arms. He let the firelight gild his cheekbones and pretended the heat was applause. "Evening," he called, and his voice carried through the haze with a practiced ease. "We brought friends. Take them home," Sloane said. She didn't raise her voice, but the yard heard her anyway. "You made yourself a stage," he went on, delighted. "It's only polite that I make use." His gaze skipped over Cashin like a stone thrown wrong and landed on Sloane, where it wanted. "Come, Luna. Say your pretty words while men do real work." Cashin moved as if something inside him broke loose. Sloane caught his sleeve, not to stop him, but to slow the piece of him that wanted to finish this with teeth. "He wants performance," she said. "Don't give him yours." "Then give him yours," Cashin said, the words more plea than order. He trusted her voice. He'd always trusted it more than he trusted his fury. The truck hit the gate again. Bolts shrieked. The fence on the left bowed inward under the weight of too many shoulders. The boats under the pier nudged closer, metal against wet wood making tiny screams. Smoke rolled, heavy and hot, and the yard swam in a shifting, ugly dusk. Sloane found the river first. She didn't drop to a crouch. She didn't need to. It was in her bones now, in the leather band resting against her pulse. She set her palm against a splintered post, feeling the throb underneath like a second heartbeat. We need wind, she thought, not words but intent. Not a hurricane. Clean breath. The river is not a pet. It does not fetch. But it is a thing that understands balance. A pulse moved across the surface, from somewhere beyond the bend, and licked the shore with a breath that felt like relief. Smoke dragged sideways, thinning, revealing faces that had wanted to be myth. Men blinked because suddenly there was air and not an excuse. Now, Cashin said, and Red Haven moved. The right flank surged to cover the men on the fence. May's arrow kissed the tire of the truck and sent it sagging low on the grinding rim. Jacks and another wolf hit the front bumper with jacks and wedges and made Metal remember it wasn't the only strong thing in the yard. The truck's engine roared. Its forward motion stuttered. The gate held. Corin did not care about the gate. He walked towards Sloane through the thinning smoke, knife in hand now, blade unremarkable and therefore more honest than the jeweled nonsense men wore when they wanted attention. His eyes were bright with the joy of being the axis someone else hated. Careful? May murmured from above, as if Sloane needed the reminder. She didn't. Her body sang with warning like a plucked string. He came swift and low, and she met him without spectacle. A pivot on the ball of her foot, a parry that wasn't a block so much as a redirection. The way Cashin had taught her in the morning when the fog still clung to the river. Metal glanced off the heel of her palm and hissed away. He liked that. He laughed. He tried to get under her skin with words the way a blade does when it doesn't like the first angle it chose. She let the words slide off. She paid attention to his weight shifts, the shallow hitch in his breath, the way his left knee didn't fully commit. He slashed. She slipped inside, pressed her palm to his sternum, and pushed. Not a throw, she didn't need distance. A pause. The air grabbed him again like a teacher catching a child's collar. He snarled, as if the humiliation were a taste he couldn't stop trying to spit out. Which? He said with too much wonder to make it insult. Do it again. You'll be ready if I do, she said, and didn't. He feinted to her right, then rolled left, knife aiming for the tender cut of her ribs. She dropped, felt the blade skim her jacket, heard the whisper of fabric surrendering, and kicked at the inside of his ankle with a sharp, mean motion May had drilled into her until it lived in muscle. He staggered. She rose into him, elbow to jaw, an ugly human strike that made his head snap and his smile falter. He was used to dance. He hated being forced to do math. At the gate, the truck gave up pretending to be useful. Its radiator screamed and died. The men behind it swore. Two bolted. One stumbled and was dragged back by another who had some loyalty's inconvenient reflexes left. Along the fence, the first wave dropped to the yard inside and was met in quiet, efficient violence. None of this was easy. It was necessary. Red Haven knew that kind of work. Sloane let the noise drop into texture again. Her world narrowed to Corin's shoulders, the line of his hips, the slight tremor in his left hand, the way his right foot made a whisper when it touched down. He was tiring. He hit it well. Men like him think their charm disguises their limits. Yield, she said again, calm, almost curious. She wasn't baiting him. She wanted to see what kind of man he was when handed a way out. He spat blood and laughter and came at her with the stubbornness of men who think a woman's mercy is a trick. It wasn't. Her patience wasn't a weakness. It was a weapon he didn't know how to fight. She took one step backward, then two forward, and caught his wrist. He twisted, knife flashing, but she tightened her grip and felt something shift in him that wasn't tendon. He was listening even if he didn't want to. She dropped his wrist and took his face in both hands. He jerked, but the bond inside her was no longer just a straight line to Cashin. It was a circle, wide enough to hold a pack. The river's hum moved through her palms. The cranes seemed to lean. The leather at her wrist warmed as if yes. She didn't command. She named. "You don't get to decide what I am," she said, low, steady. "You don't get to write a story on my skin and sell tickets. Go home, Corin. Or choose the other ending, and I'll write it for you." For a fraction of a second, his eyes went very human. Then the wolf surged in him, angry at being interrupted. He tore free, blinking, and went for her throat. Not because it was strategy, but because pride is lazy when it thinks it's urgent. She didn't step away. She stepped through. There are moments when a body forgets its old map and remembers the one it was born with. The heat that had lived inside Sloane since the first night at the hotel didn't flare this time. It deepened. Nerves quieted. Everything else sharpened. She felt her pupils widen, heard the exact instant her own heartbeat sped, tasted the iron edge of the air where the fire stole oxygen. Her hands found a balance between gentleness and force and didn't ask which was more righteous. She met Corin's momentum with angle, with breath, with the knowledge that no second chance would make him kinder. She moved, and the change moved with her. Bones didn't break. They rearranged. Skin didn't split. It translated. Her vision shifted to catch a broader arc of the yard. Her hearing flared and settled to hold both distant and near without collapsing. The world tilted and then found a new horizon line. She didn't become something else. She became more herself. She knocked the knife from his hand. It skittered soundlessly across the board. He made an outraged sound that would have been funny if it hadn't been hunting her life for days. She caught his wrist again and felt the heat of his skin and the thread of his pulse. And she didn't think I could break this or I should be merciful. She thought, "I don't cede my future to you." He tried a last dirty trick. Fingers clawing for her eyes. She dipped her head, bared teeth, and sank them into the meat of his forearm. Not a killing bite. A warning. The flavor of his shock hit her tongue like pennies. He swore then, not charming, not controlled, and yanked away, pressing his hand against the wound with a gasp that sounded half like hate and half like a child shocked by the stove.